Ethan Cole did not sleep the night before, and he had not slept properly in 3 years. That was just how things were now. He lay in the large bed in the east wing of the estate, staring at the ceiling until the first gray light of morning crept through the curtains, and then he got up, dressed in silence, and walked out of the house before any of his staff arrived. He did this most mornings, not because he needed the walk, he needed the quiet. The estate sat on the edge of the northern Pax territory, where the forest began to grow thick, and the air always smelled of pine and cold earth, no matter what season it was. Ethan had lived here for 11 years. He had brought Lyra here as his mate 6 years ago. He had painted the study a deep green because she liked green. He had planted a garden on the south side of the house because she had asked him to. And 3 years ago, he had stood at her grave in that same garden, in the rain, while Marcus held an umbrella over his head and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Now Ethan moved through the garden every morning without looking at the small stone marker near the oak tree. He had gotten very good at not looking at things. He was 34 years old. He ran a pack of over 200 wolves. He had the respect of every alpha in the northern region. He had the loyalty of fighters who would walk into fire for him. He had a house that was clean and well-maintained, and utterly silent. He had a cook named Philip who made his coffee strong and never spoke before 9 in the morning, which Ethan considered Philip's most valuable quality. He was, by every measurable standard, a successful man. He felt like a man made of chalk. Marcus caught up with him near the tree line that morning, falling into step beside him with the easy, practiced confidence of someone who had known Ethan since they were boys, and had stopped being afraid of his silences a long time ago. "Council meeting at 11, Marcus said. "I know. Boundary report came in from the Eastern team. I read it. Philip made those eggs you like." Ethan said nothing. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then, "You didn't eat last night either." "I wasn't hungry." "Ethan." "Marcus." They walked in silence for a few minutes, their boots crunching over frost-stiffened grass. The sky was the color of old pewter, low and heavy, promising rain before noon. Ethan could feel it in the air, that specific metallic weight that came before a serious November storm. He had always been able to feel weather before it arrived. Lyra used to say it was because he was too stubborn to be surprised by anything, including rain. He did not let himself think about the rest of that sentence. "The southern boundary still needs a personal inspection," he said instead, because business was always easier than anything else. The team flagged 2 areas where the perimeter markers have shifted. "I want to look at them myself. I can send Leo." I said I want to do it myself. Marcus accepted this. He always did, eventually. "Take your radio. I'll be back before the council meeting." "The radio, Ethan." Ethan looked at him sideways, and Marcus met the look with the steady patience of a man who had made peace with the fact that he could not win every argument, but was determined to win the ones that mattered. Ethan took the radio. He walked south for 40 minutes, following the old trail that cut through the dense interior of the forest, where the trees grew close together and the light filtered through in thin, pale strips. He knew this trail by memory. He had run it as a boy, chasing Marcus through the underbrush, both of them too young and too careless to think about anything beyond the next turn in the path. He had run it as a young alpha, learning the boundaries of his territory. He had walked it with Lyra once, in spring, when the wildflowers came up through the pine needles, and she had stopped every few feet to look at them. He focused on the boundary markers. The first one was easy enough to address. A large spruce had fallen across the line during the last storm, pulling the marker stake sideways. Ethan righted it, drove it deeper into the ground with his boot, and moved on. The second was more complicated. A section of the natural creek boundary had shifted after recent flooding, and he needed to measure the new distance carefully, and note it for the records. He was crouched by the creek bank, measuring and writing in the small notebook he always carried, when he heard the sound. It was small. It came from somewhere in the trees to his left, deeper in the forest, where the old growth was so thick that even in the leafless November months, the trunks blocked most of the light. He went very still. His senses sharpened the way they always did when something unexpected entered his awareness. A habit of years. A reflex of leadership. The instinct of someone who had learned that unexpected things in unexpected places demanded immediate attention. He listened. It came again. A soft, broken sound. Not quite a cry. Not quite a whimper. It was quiet enough that a person without sharpened senses would have missed it entirely. Ethan stood and moved toward it. He found them 30 meters into the old growth, beneath the shelter of a fallen pine tree whose enormous trunk had created a kind of crude roof, where it lay across two other trees, suspending itself above the ground. The space beneath it was just large enough for a very small child to crawl into. The boy was pressed against the base of the fallen trunk, knees pulled to his chest, a small rust-colored puppy tucked inside his coat against his stomach. Both of them were cold and wet and still, and both of them stared at Ethan when he crouched down outside their shelter with the same expression, enormous eyes, absolute quiet, the particular stillness of small creatures waiting to see if something large posed a threat. The boy looked about 4 years old. He had dark hair that was plastered flat to his forehead from the rain, brown eyes that took up a lot of his face, and a red coat that had been good quality once but was now soaked through. The puppy was small and scruffy, and looked like it had been about 4 weeks old when someone had loved it very much, because despite being wet and cold, it had its chin resting on the boy's arm, with the confidence of a creature that expected, in time, to be warm again. Ethan stayed very still. He had learned, in a lifetime of dealing with frightened things, that sudden movement was always the wrong answer. "Hello," he said, and his own voice surprised him a little. He had not used a gentle tone in longer than he could remember. The boy stared at him. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked. The boy shook his head once, a very small motion. "What is your name?" A pause, then, very quietly, "Noah." "That is a good name," Ethan said, which was the first thing that came to him, and which he meant genuinely. "And what is the puppy's name?" Noah looked down at the puppy as though consulting it. "Scout," he said, "because he finds things." "He found you a good shelter," Ethan said. Noah considered this with the seriousness of a child weighing a compliment. "He did," he agreed. "Noah, are you alone?" Another nod. "Where is your mother?" Something shifted in the boy's face, a shadow that did not belong on a 4-year-old's expression, the specific shadow of a child who is frightened about something they cannot fully explain. "She went to find me," he said. "I wandered. I wasn't supposed to wander." He said this last part with a particular heaviness, as though he had been repeating it to himself for some time. "She said to stay on the path. I didn't stay on the path." "How long have you been here?" "A long time," Noah said. "Scout got cold, so I put him in my coat." Ethan looked at the puppy, which blinked at him without concern. Then he looked at Noah, whose lips had a faint blue tinge that had nothing to do with his mood and everything to do with temperature. He made a decision. He set down his notebook and radio, took off his coat, the heavy waxed canvas one he wore for outdoor inspections, and held it out toward the space beneath the fallen pine. "I am going to carry you somewhere warm," he said. "Is that all right?" Noah looked at the coat. He looked at Ethan. He performed the rapid, instinctive assessment that very young children carry out on strangers, a calculation that no one has taught them, that runs entirely on some deep frequency of human intuition, faster and purer than adult analysis. Then he crawled forward out of the shelter, still holding Scout against his chest, and allowed Ethan to wrap the coat around both of them. Ethan lifted the boy with both arms. Noah was heavier than he expected, and lighter than he feared. Scout poked his nose out of the coat and sniffed the air with the air of a passenger inspecting the first-class cabin. Ethan radioed Marcus with his free hand. "I found a child in the southern old growth," he said. "About 4 years old. His name is Noah. His mother is somewhere in the forest looking for him. Get the medical post ready and send 2 trackers to find her. She may have come from the picnic clearing north of the main trail. Check there first." Marcus, to his credit, did not ask any questions. "On it," he said. 10 minutes. Ethan clipped the radio back to his belt. Noah had settled against his shoulder with the immediate, practical trust of a child who has made a decision and sees no point in second-guessing it. Scout had gone very still inside the coat, only his small amber eyes visible above the collar, tracking the movement of the trees. They walked in silence for a few minutes. The rain was beginning now, fat cold drops finding their way through the canopy and striking the dead leaves on the ground, with a sound like quiet applause. "You are very big," Noah observed, from his position on Ethan's shoulder. "I have been told that," Ethan said. "My dad was big," Noah said. Then he was quiet for a moment, and Ethan did not fill the silence, because he recognized the specific quality of that silence. "He's not here anymore," Noah added. "I am sorry to hear that," Ethan said. "Mommy says he can still see us," Noah said. "From up high. I think he can probably see me right now being carried by a stranger, and I think he is probably going to tell Mommy, and I am going to be in big trouble." Ethan almost laughed. The sensation was so unfamiliar and so sudden that he did not entirely know what to do with it. He kept his face neutral, but something shifted in his chest. A small, quiet shift, like a door that has been shut for a long time moving on its hinges. "Your father sounds like someone with a sense of humor," he said. Noah thought about this. "Mommy says I got it from him." "That is a good thing to inherit," Ethan said. They reached the edge of the tree line, where the estate's south path began, and the gray stone of the medical post was visible through the rain. Through the window, Ethan could see a light on, and the shape of Claire, the pack's senior medic, moving inside. He had crossed this path 1,000 times. He had walked into this building to visit injured pack members, to deliver news, to discuss care plans. He had done every routine, ordinary thing a leader does, in the mechanical way that routine tasks are done when the person performing them is operating from somewhere distant inside themselves. But carrying Noah across that path, he was present. For the first time, in longer than he could account for, he was entirely, specifically, uncomfortably present. He felt the weight of the child on his shoulder. He felt the cold rain. He felt Scout's small nose bump against the back of his hand inside the coat. He did not examine this. He tucked it away with the efficient, practiced skill of a man who had learned that examining things too closely only made them harder. Claire opened the door before he reached it. "Good heavens," she said, looking at the bundle in Ethan's arms. "His name is Noah," Ethan said. "He needs warming up. His puppy too, I expect." Claire stepped aside to let him in and immediately began pulling thermal blankets from the cabinet. "Set him on the examination table. Did he say if he hit his head, twisted anything?" "He says he is not hurt," Ethan said. "He was sheltering under a fallen pine. Cold, mostly." Noah looked around the medical post, with sharp, interested eyes that had shed most of their earlier fear. "Is this a hospital?" he asked. "A small one," Claire said, bringing a blanket and wrapping it around him with brisk, practiced gentleness. "Have you been in a hospital before?" "When Scout got his needle," Noah said. "He cried." "I didn't cry." Scout appeared to contest, by lifting his chin with great dignity from inside the coat. Claire smiled. She had a daughter Noah's age, and the smile she gave him was the specific warm smile of someone who recognized the species. "Let's get you both warm," she said, "and find your mum." Ethan stepped back. He stood near the door and watched Claire work, efficient and calm, warming Noah up and checking him over while Noah reported, with great thoroughness and some pride, the full story of his unauthorized wandering, including several details about interesting things he had seen along the way that suggested he had not been frightened for quite as much of the experience as one might expect. Ethan's radio buzzed. It was one of the trackers. "Alpha, we found the woman. She's fine. Heading to you now. Maybe 7 minutes out." Ethan acknowledged it. He looked at Noah, who had been given a dry blanket and a biscuit by Claire, and was now sitting cross-legged on the examination table with Scout in his lap, entirely composed, as though sitting in a stranger's medical post wrapped in a thermal blanket were a perfectly ordinary afternoon activity. "Your mother is on her way," Ethan told him. Noah looked up. The expression on his face was not the relief of a frightened child. It was something quieter and more complete than that. It was the look of someone for whom the world had just clicked back into order. "Okay," he said. Then, with the earnest politeness of a child who has been taught his manners, "Thank you for carrying me. You are very good at it." Ethan stood in the doorway of the medical post in the rain, and did not know what to do with that either. He was not used to being thanked for things that cost him nothing. He was not used to things costing him nothing. Every act of leadership for the past 3 years had been an act of will, deliberate, effortful, a choice made by the part of him that still functioned normally against the heavier part that would have preferred to be left alone. Carrying Noah through the rain had not felt like an effort. It had felt like the most natural thing he had done in 3 years, which was exactly why it unsettled him. He stayed where he was until he heard footsteps on the path. She arrived at a fast walk that had been a run for most of the distance, and she slowed, when she saw the light in the window of the medical post, and then she pushed through the door and said, "Noah," in a voice that was trying very hard to be calm, and was not quite managing it. Noah looked up from his biscuit. "Hi, Mommy," he said. "I wandered." "I know you wandered," she said, crossing the room in 3 steps, and pulling him into her arms, blanket and biscuit and puppy and all. She held him for a long moment with her eyes closed, and her face pressed into his hair, and Ethan watched from the doorway, and said nothing. She was not what he had expected, though he had not been expecting anything. She was lean and quick-looking, with dark hair in a loose braid that had come half undone during her search, and mud on her boots all the way up to the knee. Her coat was practical, and worn at the elbows. She did not look like someone who cared very much about appearances, but she had the kind of face that held attention easily anyway, not because of anything arranged about it, but because of the quality of expression in it. There was a lot of life in her face. Even now, with fear still fading from her eyes, she was fully present in a way that was almost startling. She lifted her face from Noah's hair and looked at Ethan. "You found him," she said. It was not a question. "He was sheltering in the old growth," Ethan said. "He is fine. Cold, mostly." She exhaled slowly. "Thank you," she said. Her eyes held his for a moment. Just a moment. And then she looked back at Noah, and the moment passed, and Ethan told himself that nothing in particular had happened. Outside, the rain came down in earnest. Marcus arrived 15 minutes later, slightly damp and entirely unsurprised by the scene in the medical post, because Marcus had long since accepted that Ethan's solitary inspection walks had a tendency to become more complicated than planned. He stood in the doorway and raised his eyebrows at his alpha in the way he had perfected over 30 years of friendship, which communicated, quite efficiently, something along the lines of, "I leave you alone for 90 minutes. Ethan said nothing. He picked up his notebook from the table where he had set it, clipped his radio back to his belt, and reminded himself that the council meeting was in an hour and a half. He was nearly out the door when Noah called after him. "Mr. Big Man." Ethan stopped. "Your coat," Noah said. He was still wrapped in the thermal blanket, but he held out Ethan's waxed canvas coat with both hands, very solemnly, the way a child hands back something important. Ethan looked at the coat. He looked at Noah. "Keep it until you are warm," he said. Noah considered this, decided it was acceptable, and nodded. Ethan walked out into the rain without his coat, and did not entirely understand why that felt right. Elena Voss had a rule about crying in front of her son, and the rule was that she did not do it. She had kept this rule through the hardest 14 months of her life, through Daniel's funeral, through the moving boxes, through 3 a.m. feedings when Noah was tiny and screaming, and she was so tired that the walls seemed to breathe, through the day she sold their first home because she could not afford to keep it, through every moment that pressed down hard enough that any reasonable person would have broken. She had held the line. Noah was 4 years old, and he needed a mother who was upright and functioning, and Elena had decided, in the parking lot of the hospital, on the worst day of her life, that being upright and functioning was the single thing she could always choose, even when she could not choose anything else. She kept the rule on the walk back to their rented cabin that evening too, even though her hands were shaking, and her chest felt like someone had reached in and rearranged things. She kept it through Noah's bath, and through dinner, and through the long, winding story he told her about the man who had found him, which featured the man's size, his coat, and Scout's immediate opinion of him as its primary plot points. She kept it through 2 readings of his favorite book, and through checking on him twice after he fell asleep, to make sure he was still breathing, which was something she had done every night since Daniel died, and suspected she would do for the rest of her life. She waited until she was standing at the kitchen sink washing the dinner dishes before she let herself feel it, the specific, jagged terror of arriving at a medical post and seeing the light on inside, and not yet knowing, for the 3 seconds it took to open the door, whether her son was all right. She pressed her hands flat on the edge of the sink and breathed. Noah was fine. He had been remarkably fine. He had, if she was honest, been somewhat pleased with himself, which was its own particular kind of complicated. He had wandered into a forest in November and emerged with a new coat, a biscuit, and a story he clearly intended to tell for some time. Elena was grateful. She was also still frightened in the residual way that fear lingers in the body, long after the mind has accepted that the emergency is over. She was also aware, in a quiet corner of her thoughts that she was not examining directly, of the man in the doorway of the medical post. She focused on the dishes. She had been in the Northern Pack's territory for 8 months now. She had moved from the Western Territories in March, following a job offer from the Regional Wildlife Conservation Office, a position she had applied for because it was exactly the work she was trained for, and because it was 300 miles from every street corner and coffee shop and familiar face that reminded her of what she had lost. The job was good. The work was meaningful. Noah had settled into his new nursery school with the adaptability of small children who have not yet learned that change is supposed to be difficult. She had not made many friends. This was partly circumstance. She worked long hours, often in the field, and came home to Noah in the evenings, with very little energy left over for social effort. But it was also partly deliberate. She was not ready for people who knew her story to look at her with that particular careful expression, the one that meant they were deciding how much to feel sorry for her. She preferred being new. Being new meant she was just Elena, the vet from the Western region, the one with the small boy and the slightly ridiculous puppy, rather than Elena the widow, Elena the one whose husband died young and left her alone. She finished the dishes and dried her hands and stood in the quiet kitchen for a moment. She thought about the coat. The man, his name was Ethan, she had gathered from the tracker who'd brought her to the medical post, had left his coat around Noah without being asked, and walked out into the rain without it. It had not been a dramatic gesture. He had simply done it, in the matter-of-fact way of someone who had assessed a situation and acted on the most sensible course, and then he had walked away, and Elena had been left holding a 4-year-old child, in a coat that was several sizes too large, and smelled of pine resin and wood smoke. Noah had fallen asleep in the truck on the way home, with his nose pressed against the collar. That was fine. Children found comfort in familiar smells. It was basic child development, entirely explainable. Elena went to bed, and did not think about it further. She did think about returning the coat, though. Obviously, she would return it. It looked expensive, and it was not hers. And beyond that, it seemed wrong to keep something that had been given out of straightforward kindness without giving something back. She would return it tomorrow, she decided, when she had time. Tomorrow turned into the day after, partly because she had a full day of field assessments, and partly because she was not entirely sure how one returned a coat to an Alpha King, without it becoming a whole complicated thing. She was not a pack member. She was an independent professional, operating on contract with the Regional Conservation Office, which meant her relationship with the Northern Pack was cordial and functional, but not close. She had met Marcus twice, briefly, at the boundary marker surveys she had assisted with in her first few weeks. She had not met Ethan before. She asked one of her field colleagues about him. "Ethan Cole," said Owen, her junior assistant, without looking up from the water sample he was cataloging. "Alpha of the Northern Pack, has been for 6 years? 7? Something like that. Lost his mate a few years back." He glanced up. "Car accident, I think. Real rough. Pack went quiet for a long time." Elena absorbed this. "What is he like?" Owen considered. "Serious," he said. "Fair, from what I hear. Good alpha. Takes care of his pack, keeps the territory clean, doesn't start trouble. My cousin is in the Northern Pack and says people respect him a lot. Just serious. Like, very serious. Not the kind of person who shows up to the summer gathering and dances, you know what I mean?" Elena nodded. She knew that kind of serious. She had been that kind of serious herself for a while. On the 3rd day, she drove to the estate. She had taken the coat to the dry cleaner in town. This felt important, returning it clean, not just folded, and had picked it up that morning in its paper wrapping. She had told herself on the drive over that this was a simple, brief errand, that she would hand the coat to whoever answered the door, say a few polite words, and leave. What she had not accounted for was the gate. The Northern Pack estate had a security gate at the main entrance, staffed at all times, and the person currently staffing it was a tall young man with a watchful expression who looked at Elena's truck with the careful attention of someone doing his job properly. "Can I help you?" he said. "I am here to return something that belongs to Ethan Cole," Elena said. He looked at the paper-wrapped coat on the passenger seat. "Does he know you are coming?" "No," Elena admitted. "I did not have a way to contact him directly. My son was found in the forest a few days ago. Ethan found him and lent him a coat, and I am returning it." The guard's expression did not change precisely, but something shifted in it, a slight softening, as though this information slotted into a category he recognized. He made a radio call. There was a short exchange she could not fully hear. Then he nodded and opened the gate. "He is in the south courtyard," the guard said. "Marcus will meet you." Marcus met her at the top of the drive, and Elena had the distinct sense, shaking his hand, that she was being assessed in a way that was thorough but not unfriendly, the way an old friend assesses someone new who has walked into the story. "He is just finishing up," Marcus said. "5 minutes. Can I get you anything? Coffee?" "I am all right, thank you," Elena said. "I do not want to interrupt anything. I just wanted to return the coat." Marcus looked at the paper-wrapped parcel in her hands, and then back at her, with an expression she could not quite read. "He can come to you," he said, "if you want to wait by the south door." She waited. The courtyard was well maintained, stone paving, a stone bench along one wall, a large oak near the corner that had dropped most of its leaves and stood bare against the gray sky. A fountain sat in the center, switched off for winter, its basin filled with the previous night's rainwater. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps on the stone, unhurried, and even, the footsteps of someone who always moved at exactly the pace they intended to move. Then he came through the south door and stopped when he saw her. He looked different from the impression she had formed in the dim light of the medical post. He was large. Owen's cousin had not been exaggerating when presumably someone in the pack had mentioned this, but what she had not registered properly the first time was the quality of his stillness. Most large people had a physical self-consciousness that expressed itself in either deliberate ease or subtle tension. He had neither. He occupied his size the way old buildings occupy their foundations, without thinking about it. "Ms. Voss," he said. "Elena," she corrected, before she had decided to. He accepted this without comment. "You did not have to come in person," he said. "I wanted to return it properly," she said, and held out the parcel. "I had it cleaned. I hope that is all right." He took it from her, turned it once in his hands, and set it on the bench. He did not seem particularly concerned about the coat, she noticed. He seemed more focused on her face, in a way that was direct but not rude, the way a person looks at someone when they are paying attention. "How is Noah?" he asked. The question was simple, and it loosened something in her chest, in a way she had not expected. "He is very well," she said. "He has told everyone who will listen about his adventure. His nursery teacher sent me a note asking if we are all right." Something shifted at the corner of Ethan's mouth. It was not quite a smile. It moved too briefly and too carefully for that, but it was something adjacent to one, and it changed his face entirely for the moment it lasted. "Good," he said. "He talked about you," Elena said, and then was not sure why she had said it. Ethan said nothing, but his eyes stayed on her. "He called you the big man," she clarified. "He described your coat in some detail, and Scout's opinion of you, at length." "Scout has opinions," Ethan observed. "Scout has many opinions," Elena agreed. "He is 4 months old and has already formed positions on most things." There was a small silence between them. Not uncomfortable, but not nothing either. A silence that had a shape to it. "You are the wildlife vet," Ethan said. "The one working the Eastern Boundary Survey." "Yes," Elena said. "I have been here 8 months. I imagine you have the briefing sheets on everyone who works near the territory." "I do," he said, without any apology for it. "I did not connect the name until Marcus told me this morning." She accepted this. It was straightforward, and she appreciated straightforward. "Well," she said, "I should let you get back to your work. I only wanted to return the coat and thank you again. What you did for Noah, I am genuinely grateful. He was cold and alone," Ethan said. "I carried him somewhere warm. It was not a complicated decision." "It was the right decision," Elena said. "That matters more than whether it was complicated." He looked at her for a moment, with an expression she could not decode. Not guarded, exactly, but careful, the way a person looks when something has caught them slightly off their expected script. "It does," he said. His voice was quiet. Elena picked up the empty feeling in her hands, where the coat had been, and reminded herself that she had said what she came to say. She was about to say goodbye, when a small shape appeared in the courtyard doorway. Noah, who had not been in the car when she arrived, had apparently let himself out of it, walked through the open gate, followed the path to the south courtyard by some navigational instinct that she was going to have a very serious conversation with him about, and arrived. He was wearing his red coat and his best expression of innocent inquiry. "You found him," he said to Elena. "I was returning his coat," Elena said, through her teeth, with extreme patience. "Oh," Noah turned his gaze to Ethan. His face lit up with simple, uncomplicated pleasure. "Hello," he said. "I told my teacher about you. She said you sounded very responsible." Ethan crouched down to Noah's level. Elena watched this happen, and felt the specific ache that came from watching someone choose, without calculation, to meet a child where the child was. "That is a kind thing to say," Ethan told Noah. "Do you have a dog?" Noah asked. "I do not." Noah considered this seriously. "You should get one," he said. "Scout likes you. He told me this morning." Elena looked at the sky briefly. "Scout is an excellent judge," Ethan said. "He is," Noah agreed. Then he reached into his pocket and produced a drawing that had been folded many times and was slightly crumpled at the edges. He held it out to Ethan with the gravity of a diplomat presenting credentials. "I drew this for you," he said. "It is you carrying me in the forest. That is Scout on your shoulder." Ethan took the drawing and looked at it. He was quiet for a moment. In the drawing, made in orange and brown crayon, a very large figure carried a small figure through trees that were mostly triangles. A red-orange shape on the large figure's shoulder was unmistakably, enthusiastically, a dog. "This is very good," Ethan said. "Thank you," Noah said, with the easy confidence of someone who has had his artistic work praised before. "The trees were hard. Trees are hard to draw." "They are," Ethan agreed. He folded the drawing carefully and put it in the pocket of his jacket. Noah watched this with obvious satisfaction. Elena stood in the courtyard with the bare oak behind her, and the fountain quiet in the center, and the gray sky overhead, and did not examine what she was feeling, because she was not ready to examine it, and possibly she would never be ready to examine it, and that was all right. "We will leave you to your morning," she said firmly, and took Noah's hand, and the two of them walked back across the courtyard toward the gate. "Goodbye," Noah called over his shoulder. Scout, who had apparently exited the truck at the same time as Noah and simply been more discreet about it, trotted out from beneath the bench where he had been sitting undetected, fell in beside Noah's feet, and they all walked through the gate together. Elena did not look back. She told herself she did not want to. She told herself this for most of the drive home, while Noah described the courtyard in detail and explained his theories about what a person would keep in a house that large, and Scout sat in the back seat and watched the road with his amber eyes. She was not ready to examine what she felt. She had too much history for easy feelings, and too much sense to pretend that the straightforward act of returning a dry-cleaned coat was anything more than it was. But she had looked up the name Ethan Cole when she got home that first night, just to confirm what Owen had told her, and in one of the regional pack records she had found his photograph, a formal one, taken at some leadership assembly, the kind of photo where people look slightly more official and slightly less human than they actually are. And she had looked at it and thought, that is not what his face looked like when he looked at Noah's drawing. She closed the browser and made dinner, and did not think about it again. Not that night. Not much, anyway. He had put the drawing on his desk. Ethan did not analyze this decision. He set it there on a Tuesday afternoon, and on Wednesday morning it was still there, propped against the base of the lamp, and he looked at it while he drank his coffee, and did not ask himself why he had not put it in a drawer. It was a good drawing, for a 4-year-old. The trees were enthusiastic triangles. The large figure had no neck to speak of, but it did have what appeared to be very determined eyebrows. Scout on the shoulder was rendered in exuberant orange, and managed, somehow, to look like Scout, that specific combination of small, alert, and entirely self-assured that the puppy had apparently possessed since birth. Ethan drank his coffee, and read the morning boundary reports, and thought about the council agenda. He did not think about Elena Voss. He thought about her approximately 7 times before 9 in the morning, which he acknowledged was inefficient, and then he went to the council meeting, and was entirely focused on the council meeting, and then he thought about her twice more on the walk back to the estate, and then he stopped accounting for it, and simply let the day be what it was. Marcus noticed something that afternoon. Ethan knew, because Marcus had a very particular way of not saying things that communicated them more clearly than most people's direct statements. He sat across from Ethan at the estate table, going through the Eastern Territory Water Rights Report, and every 15 minutes or so he was very carefully not looking at the drawing on the desk. "Say it," Ethan said, without looking up from his report. "I did not say anything," Marcus said. "You are saying nothing very loudly." Marcus put down his papers. He was 41, broad-shouldered, with gray beginning at his temples, and the unhurried manner of a man who had been patient about things for a long time. He and Ethan had grown up in the same pack, trained together, taken their first assignments together. Marcus had been the one to tell Ethan about the accident. He had been the one to sit with him through the night that followed, saying nothing, because there was nothing to say, and because sitting with someone in the dark was sometimes the most you could do, and also the most that was needed. "She seemed like a sensible person," Marcus said, which was, in its way, high praise from Marcus. "She is sensible," Ethan said. "She is also not the subject of this meeting." "We do not have a meeting," Marcus said. "We are reading reports." "Then read yours." Marcus returned to his report. 3 minutes of silence passed. "Noah left a drawing," Marcus said. "I know. I was there." "It is a very good drawing." Ethan said nothing. "You put it on the desk," Marcus observed. "Marcus, I am just noting that it is on the desk." Ethan set down his pen. He looked at Marcus with the level, unhurried expression of a man who has been friends with someone long enough to have run out of any performance of patience, and is now simply in possession of the actual thing. "She is a person who returned a coat," he said. "She did not make any particular impression. Her son made an impression. Children occasionally do that. It does not require extensive analysis." Marcus looked at him with the same level, unhurried expression. "What?" Ethan said. "Nothing," Marcus said, and went back to his report. Ethan went back to his. The drawing sat against the lamp in his peripheral vision. He did not look at it, because he had decided not to look at it, and he was very good at deciding things and then doing them. He was quite good at it, usually. The problem, and it was a small problem, not a significant problem, a problem he could have set aside entirely, if he had simply chosen to, was that Noah's words in the forest kept returning to him, at inopportune moments. He would be in the middle of a meeting, or reading a report, or walking the perimeter at dusk the way he did some evenings, and something would surface in his memory, the sound of rain on pine needles, the specific weight of the child on his shoulder, and Noah's voice, small and matter-of-fact, saying, "You smell just like my mommy." He knew what the words meant, intellectually. Children were observant about scent, in a way that adults learn to suppress. Noah had spent his first months in this territory, which shared environmental characteristics, pine, creek water, cold earth, wood smoke, with whatever environment his mother occupied daily. He had simply noted a resemblance. It meant nothing else. Except that the moment Noah had said it, something in Ethan had moved. Not slowly. Not like something waking gradually from a long sleep, but with the sudden violent clarity of a match being struck. His wolf, which had been so quiet for 3 years that he had sometimes wondered if it had simply retreated entirely, had gone from stillness to absolute attention in the space of a breath. This disturbed him deeply, and he dealt with it the way he dealt with things that disturbed him, which was to be extremely competent and busy for several days running. He inspected the northern boundary. He held 2 additional training sessions with the younger fighters. He drafted the new seasonal patrol schedule 3 weeks ahead of when it needed drafting. He read reports he did not need to read yet. He reorganized the document filing system in the estate office, which had needed reorganizing for 2 years, but which he had previously not been bothered enough to do. Philip noticed, because Philip noticed everything that happened in the kitchen and the house, and seemed to have a peripheral awareness of everything that happened everywhere else as well. He did not say anything about it directly. He simply began making slightly better breakfasts, not elaborate, just better, the kind of improvement in daily small things that a person makes when they are trying, quietly, to mark that they have noticed something. Ethan ate the breakfasts. On the 9th day after Elena's visit, he drove to the Eastern Boundary Survey site. He had a legitimate reason to be there. The water rights report had flagged a discrepancy in the creek measurements in that section, and it needed a personal review. He had been planning to send Leo, or one of the senior rangers. He had, this morning, decided to go himself. He arrived at the survey site at 10 in the morning. The conservation team's truck was already parked on the access road, a green vehicle with the Regional Wildlife Office's logo on the side. Mud spattered up to the door handles in the way of vehicles that spent serious time in serious terrain. There were 2 people working at the creek bank, 20 meters from the tree line. One of them was Owen, young, earnest, with his data tablet in a waterproof case, and the slightly harassed expression of someone managing more variables than expected. The other was Elena. She was crouched at the water's edge, taking a measurement with a long metal gauge, and she was wearing the practical coat with the worn elbows and mud-stained boots that appeared to be her standard fieldwork uniform. She had her hair back in the same loose braid. She was talking to Owen about something in a low, focused voice, and she did not look up when Ethan arrived because she was concentrating. Ethan watched her work for approximately 4 seconds, which was 4 seconds longer than necessary, and then walked over to where Owen was standing. "Alpha Cole," Owen said, with the slightly startled formality of someone who had not expected the Alpha himself. We were told someone from your team would review the creek section today. I decided to come myself," Ethan said. "How is the measurement discrepancy?" Owen launched into an explanation that was thorough and a little rushed, the explanation of someone who was professionally competent but mildly unnerved by his audience. Ethan listened carefully, asked 2 precise questions, and nodded. Then Elena stood up from the bank with the gauge in one hand and the measurement notebook in the other, and turned to hand the notebook to Owen. She saw Ethan. There was a very brief moment, just a moment, where something crossed her face that was not surprise exactly, or not only surprise. Then it settled back into the composed expression she seemed to carry as a default. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," Ethan said. "I am here for the creek review." "Of course," she said. It was a perfectly normal response, and there was nothing wrong with it, and yet, in some entirely unreasonable way, it made him feel that she had identified why he was there, and had decided to be polite about it. He was not accustomed to being seen through. He was accustomed to being the person in the room who saw through things. "How is Noah?" he asked, because it was the natural thing to ask, and also because he genuinely wanted to know. A real smile arrived on her face at the mention of Noah's name. It was different from the composed, professional expression she had been wearing. It had warmth and an edge of rueful humor to it, like sunlight breaking briefly through consistent clouds. "He has decided," she said, "that the forest is his personal domain. I have given him a very clear boundary map and made him memorize it." "Has Scout memorized it too?" "Scout has opinions about boundaries," Elena said. "His opinion is that boundaries are for other dogs." Owen, who had been following this exchange with the politely confused expression of someone who had missed the preceding chapter, excused himself to recheck an upstream measurement. Ethan and Elena stood at the edge of the creek, and the water moved beside them, clear and cold, carrying the last of November's leaves on its surface. "I want to tell you something," Ethan said. She turned to look at him. Her expression was open and careful at the same time, the expression of someone who has learned to be honest, and has also learned to be measured. "When Noah said what he said in the forest," Ethan said, and then stopped, because he had not thought through how to say this, and was now discovering that it was harder to say than it had seemed when he had decided he should say it. "He said you smell like, that I smelled like you, or that you smell like me, the same. He said that." "I know what he said," she said quietly. "I want to be honest with you about it," Ethan said. I have not felt that kind of recognition in a long time. What he said caught me off guard. I am not saying it means anything. I am not saying it requires anything of you. I thought you should know that it was not nothing, for me, and that I am aware of that, and I am not going to pretend it did not happen." The creek ran beside them. A crow called somewhere in the trees overhead. Elena looked at the water for a long moment. "I am not ready for anything," she said. It was not unkind. It was exactly what it sounded like, honest and careful and real. "I know," he said. And then, "Neither am I." She looked at him. "Then why are you here?" "I told you," he said. "The creek measurement discrepancy." Something shifted in her expression, a movement at the corner of her mouth that might have been the beginning of a smile. "Right," she said. "The creek. The creek is a legitimate concern," he said. "I believe you," she said. The creek is measurably off by about half a meter due to the autumn flood. She handed him the measurement notebook. He took it and looked at the figures, because they were real figures about a real creek, and he was genuinely interested in them. He made notes. She pointed out the areas of concern with the matter-of-fact precision of a professional who knew her work well and did not oversell it. They worked side by side for 40 minutes. Owen rejoined them. At some point it simply became a professional meeting about water measurements and boundary markers, the kind of meeting that happened in this territory several times a month, entirely ordinary. And yet Ethan was aware, the whole time, of the particular frequency she occupied in whatever sense it was that kept telling him she was there, just to his left, 3 feet away, checking her notebook. When the work was done and she was closing her equipment bag, Noah called. Elena answered immediately, because Elena apparently always answered immediately when Noah called. "Hi, love." A pause. What did she say? Another pause, during which Elena's expression moved through several things rapidly, landing on the rueful end of fond. "Well, that was an accident. I am sure she knows you did not mean it." A pause. "Noah, put it back." "No. Yes. All of it." She pressed her eyes closed briefly. "I will be home by 5. Do not move anything else." "Yes." She listened for another moment. "I love you too. Put it back." She hung up and rubbed her face with the back of her hand. "Everything all right?" Ethan asked. "Noah has apparently rearranged the contents of the kitchen to create what he is describing as a base," she said. "He is being supervised by my neighbor's teenage daughter, and I think I need to go home." "A base," Ethan repeated. "For operations," Elena said, picking up her bag. "He has been talking about operations since the forest. I think your occupation impressed him." Ethan looked at her. "You are a pack alpha," she said. "He knows this. He thinks it sounds important. He has decided he would also like to be in charge of operations." She slung the bag onto her shoulder. "Owen, I will see you Thursday. Alpha Cole." "Ethan," he said. She paused. She looked at him with the same clear, careful expression she always seemed to be wearing, the expression of someone who weighed things honestly. "Ethan," she said, and the sound of his name in her voice was completely ordinary, and, in some way that he would not think about directly, not ordinary at all. "Thank you for the creek review." She walked to the green truck, got in, and drove away down the access road. Owen finished packing up equipment, in a silence that he was very carefully maintaining, and which Ethan appreciated. Ethan looked at the creek. It ran steadily over its stones, cold and clear, about half a meter further east than it had been in the summer survey. He drove back to the estate, and sat at his desk, and did not look at the drawing. Then he looked at the drawing. He sat with it for a minute, the crayon trees, the large figure with the determined eyebrows, the exuberant orange dog. Then he picked up his pen and went back to the boundary reports. But that evening, for the first time in 3 years, he did not stand in the dark garden looking at things he was not looking at. He sat in the study with a cup of coffee and read a book, an ordinary book, nothing important, and the house did not feel quite as hollow as it usually did. He noticed this. He did not make anything of it. He simply noticed it, the way you notice that the weather has shifted slightly, without yet knowing what the new weather will bring. He went to bed at a reasonable hour and slept for 5 continuous hours, which was more than he had slept in a single stretch since he could last remember. In the morning, Philip made very good eggs, and Ethan ate them without being reminded. The next morning, Claire stopped him in the hallway outside the medical post. She was a practical woman, who did not usually stop people in hallways to talk about things that were not medical in nature, so Ethan paid attention. "He slept," she said. Not about Ethan. She said it about the situation, the way a medic reports a patient's progress, and the patient she meant was not in the building. "I know," Ethan said. "You are sleeping better too," she said. "Your eyes look different." "Claire," he said. "I am just noting it medically," she said, with the entirely straight expression of a woman who was not doing anything medically. "Sleep has measurable effects on a person's presentation." "Thank you, Claire," he said. She nodded and went back into the medical post, and Ethan went to the council meeting, and the council meeting went the way council meetings went, and afterward Marcus walked with him back to the estate, and they went over the quarterly boundary summary, and Ethan gave his full attention to all of it, which was easier than it had been in weeks. In the afternoon, he drove the eastern boundary road. He did not stop at the survey site. He drove it slowly, the way he drove it when he was thinking through the territory, rather than inspecting it, taking in the winter state of things, the creek levels, the condition of the tree line, the places where the hard frosts had pushed the ground and needed marking for spring. He was a thorough alpha because thoroughness was how he had been taught, and also because he found it genuinely satisfying, the sense of a thing known completely. He knew this territory completely, or he had believed he did. He had not known it would produce this. He had not known that a November rain and a fallen pine and a boy with a puppy pressed to his chest could amount to a shift in the internal weather of a man who had stopped expecting weather. He did not tell himself it was nothing, because that ship had sailed. He also did not tell himself it was everything, because he was not ready for everything, and he did not think she was either. And the particular care required when two people with histories are moving toward each other is the kind of care that must be genuinely meant to do any good. He drove back to the estate as the short winter afternoon ended, and the lights came on across the building as Philip made his rounds, and the house received the dark the way old houses do, not fighting it, just holding what it held. Ethan went to his study and read for an hour. The drawing was on his desk. He looked at it once, briefly, with the honest acknowledgement of a man who had stopped pretending it was not there, and started simply letting it be there. That was enough for now. For now, that was genuinely enough. The Northern Pack's winter solstice gathering happened every year on the longest night of December, and it was the one event Ethan attended not as an alpha on duty, but as a member of his pack. He had maintained this tradition even in the years after Lyra died, because his pack needed to see him present, and because Lyra had loved the gathering, and would have been irritated if he had used her absence as a reason to stop attending. He stood near the edge of the main fire that evening, holding a cup of mulled cider he had not drunk, and watching his pack move around him. Families with children, older pack members in clusters, the younger fighters taking up more than their share of the benches, in the way of people who have not yet learned that space is something you make for others. Claire was there with her husband and her daughter. Marcus was there with his wife, Nina, who was laughing at something someone had said, and whose laughter carried across the clearing. The fire was large and very warm, and the smell of pine smoke and spiced cider and cold night air was exactly what the solstice always smelled like. Ethan stood at the edge of it and felt almost inside it. "You are doing the thing," Marcus said, appearing beside him. "What thing?" "The standing at the edge looking like a very responsible lamppost thing." "I am here," Ethan said. "You are technically present," Marcus said, "which is a slightly different thing." Ethan drank his cider. It was good. Philip had made it, and Philip's cider was one of the genuinely excellent things in Ethan's daily life. "I am not good at gatherings," he said. "You used to be," Marcus said. This was true. Ethan had, before everything that was before, been the kind of person who moved easily through social situations, who could carry a conversation with anyone, who had a particular gift for making people feel that he was genuinely glad they were there. This was not a performance. He had genuinely been glad. He had liked people, in the easy, uncomplicated way of someone who has not yet been taught by loss to hold themselves at a slight distance from the things they could lose. He had not lost the ability, exactly. He had simply lost the ease. Everything now had a layer of effort between him and it. "Elena Voss is here," Marcus said, in a tone that was almost entirely neutral. Ethan turned his head. She was across the fire, near the food tables, and she was there because of course she was there. The conservation team was affiliated with the territory, and the solstice gathering was open to affiliated professionals as well as pack members. She was talking to one of the senior conservationists, Owen, standing beside her, and she was wearing something warmer than her usual fieldwork clothes, a dark coat, her hair loose tonight instead of braided. Noah was beside her, wearing a wool hat with a small bear on it that appeared to have been put on recently and at an angle, suggesting he had resisted it before accepting it. Scout was not present. Elena had enough good judgment to know that bringing Scout to a gathering of 200 people would be more excitement than Scout was ready for. Noah spotted Ethan from across the fire, with the unerring accuracy of a child who has added someone to his internal map of important people. His face lit up. He said something to Elena. Elena followed his gaze. She looked at Ethan for exactly the length of time it took to see him and acknowledge him, then looked back at Noah and said something, and Noah bounced twice on his heels, his apparent method of processing excitement, and started toward the fire. Ethan met him halfway, because going toward Noah was always the natural thing to do. "You are here," Noah said, as though Ethan's presence at his own PAX gathering was a delightful surprise. "I live here," Ethan said. "I know," Noah said, with the patient tolerance of a child, clarifying something the adult has slightly misunderstood. "But I did not know you would be at the party. Mommy said maybe." "It is not exactly a party," Ethan said. "There is fire and food and music," Noah said. "That is a party." Ethan could not argue with this. "Come and see the fire with us," Noah said, with the inviting confidence of someone who has no doubt that the invitation will be accepted. He took Ethan's hand in the same matter-of-fact way he had taken it in the medical post, complete, casual, immediate, as though this were a normal continuation of something already established. Ethan went. Elena watched them come toward her with an expression that was almost neutral but had something working underneath it. Not alarm, not displeasure, something more complicated. She had the look of a person managing a response that she had decided not to let determine her actions. "He found you," she said. "He was very direct about it," Ethan said. "He does not do subtle," Elena agreed. She had a cup of cider too, and she wrapped both hands around it, in the way of someone who is cold, but is staying out anyway, because the occasion calls for it. "How are you?" It was such a simple question, and he was so unused to being asked it. Not because people did not ask him how he was, they asked him all the time, but because the way she asked it carried the expectation of an honest answer, rather than a comfortable one. "Better than yesterday," he said, which was true. She looked at him. "That is a specific kind of answer," she said. "You asked a specific kind of question." Noah had let go of Ethan's hand and moved to the food table, where he was conducting a focused investigation of the available items. Elena kept one eye on him with the practiced background awareness of a parent whose child is in a known range. "He talks about you," she said. "Noah?" "Every day," she said. "He has a system, apparently. He has decided that the important people in his life need to know each other, and he is managing the introductions. He introduced me to Scout's opinions," Ethan said. "You are ahead of most people," she said. "He usually makes them meet Scout in person first. Scout requires a home visit before opinions are shared." Something loosened in Ethan's chest. The same small shift he had felt in the forest. The sensation of something that had been wound tight for a very long time, easing by 1 degree. He had been trying, for 2 weeks, to decide what to do with this loosening, whether to allow it or to address it the way he addressed most things that threatened to become complicated, which was to be very competent and busy until they subsided. It had not subsided. It had, if anything, become more specific. "Elena," he said. She looked at him. "I would like to ask you something," he said. "And I want you to answer honestly. And if the honest answer is no, then I would like you to say no, without worrying about how I will take it, because I am an adult, and I can take an honest answer." She had gone still in the way of someone who is very alert without showing it. "All right," she said. "Would you like to have coffee with me?" he said. "Not here, and not as a professional introduction. Just coffee. At some point when you are not working, and Noah is at school." She was quiet for a moment. Noah appeared at her elbow with a piece of shortbread and the satisfied expression of someone who has successfully negotiated the food table. He looked between the two of them, and then, apparently deciding that the adult situation was proceeding acceptably, went back to the table for a second piece. "I have Tuesday mornings free," Elena said, "from 8 until 11, when Noah's session at the nursery ends." Ethan absorbed this. "Tuesday," he said. "There is a place in town," she said. "Pine Street Coffee. It is good. I go there sometimes on Tuesdays when I am not in the field." "I know the place," he said. She looked at him steadily, with the clear-eyed honesty that seemed to be simply how she was, not a performance of directness but the actual thing. "I want to be clear that I am not looking for anything in particular," she said. "I am not in a position to make promises about anything, and I do not think you are either. I am simply agreeing to coffee. That is all I am asking for," he said. She nodded once, as though this settled something. Noah returned with shortbread for both of them, distributed it with the authority of a small host, and then looked up at Ethan, with a specific expression that Ethan was starting to recognize as his thinking face, the face he made when he had formed an opinion and was considering how to present it. "Are you going to be our friend?" Noah asked. Elena made a very small sound that might have been the beginning of something, and which she stopped. Ethan looked at Noah for a moment. "I think I would like that," he said. Noah considered this for a moment, as though the answer needed checking against some internal standard. Then he nodded, with the decisive satisfaction of someone who has reached a verdict. "Good," he said. "Scout will be happy." "And you?" Ethan asked. Noah thought about this with great seriousness, the way he thought about most things. "I think so," he said. "I need to check with Scout first, but I think so." He wandered off toward the fire, eating his shortbread, entirely satisfied. Elena watched him go, and then turned back to the fire and the gathering, and did not say anything for a moment. The flames were very high now, and the pack moved around them, and the music had started at the far end of the clearing, someone with a fiddle, and someone else keeping time on a drum. "He wants you in his life," she said, not looking at Ethan. Her voice was even, but he could hear what was underneath it. "I know," he said. "He does not do that with everyone," she said. "He is friendly with everyone. He is friendly with the postman, and the woman at the dry cleaner, and the librarian who lets him choose the story on Thursday mornings. But what he does with you is different. He has decided something about you." "He has good instincts," Ethan said. "He does," she said. "He gets them from his father." She said this simply, without the catch in the voice that the mention of Daniel sometimes brought, because she had been working for a long time on being able to say Daniel's name like a real name, rather than a wound. Daniel always knew within 5 minutes whether someone was worth knowing. "And?" Ethan said. She looked at him sideways. "Daniel would have liked you," she said. "He would have said you were too serious, and then he would have worked very hard to make you laugh, and when he finally managed it, he would have been insufferably pleased with himself." Ethan held this with the care it deserved. "He sounds like someone worth knowing," he said. "He was," she said. "He really was." They stood by the fire for a while longer, not talking, while the music played and the pack moved around them, and Noah appeared periodically to report interesting findings from his investigation of the gathering. At some point Marcus drifted close and introduced himself to Elena with the ease of a man who had decided in advance to like her and was simply confirming it. Nina came with him and immediately engaged Noah in a conversation about Scout that Noah found entirely satisfying. At 9, Elena said she needed to get Noah home. Noah said goodbye to Marcus and Nina, and to Ethan, with the thoroughness of a child who takes his social obligations seriously. He hugged Ethan, briefly and naturally, and Ethan felt the specific weight of a small child's arms for a moment, and then Noah was off, trotting alongside Elena toward the parking area. Ethan stood by the fire. Marcus appeared at his shoulder. "Well," Marcus said. "Marcus, I know what you are simply doing." "Coffee," Marcus said, in a tone of great innocence. "I hear Pine Street has good coffee." Ethan looked at him with the level expression of a man who has run out of ways to tell his oldest friend to mind his own business and has decided to stop trying. "Tuesday," Ethan said. Marcus smiled, a real smile, wide and warm, the kind Ethan had not seen him direct at him in some time. "Good," he said. "Good." He moved off back toward Nina. Ethan stayed by the fire a little longer and watched it burn and felt the night air around him and did not stand at the edge of things. He did not know what Tuesday would be. He did not know what coffee with a person who had agreed to coffee and nothing more would look like, or where it would go, or whether it would go anywhere at all. He knew that he was 34 years old and that his wolf had been quiet for 3 years, and that something about a 4-year-old child saying 7 words in a rainy forest had broken something open that 3 years of careful management had not. He did not know what to do with that. He was not sure anyone did. But Tuesday was 4 days away, and the fire was warm, and for the first time in a long time, the night felt like something he was inside, rather than watching from a careful distance. He finished his cider. Philip appeared at his elbow with a fresh cup, because Philip always knew, and offered it without comment. Ethan took it and stayed a while longer. Ethan stayed by the fire for nearly an hour after Marcus left. He watched his pack move through the gathering, the way families with young children navigated the space, keeping the little ones in view without appearing to, the instinctive choreography of parents. He watched the older pack members settle near the edges of things with the comfortable authority of people who have earned their rest. He watched the young fighters be loud and take up too much space, which they did every year, and which every year resolved itself by midnight when the cold drove them indoors. He had done all of this before. He had stood at all of these same gatherings and watched all of these same patterns and felt, if he was honest, like a man watching through glass, present in body, elsewhere in some more important sense. Tonight the glass was thinner. He did not know how to explain this. He was not someone who spent a great deal of time trying to explain internal states, partly because he had learned that the most important things resisted clean explanation, and partly because he was the alpha, and the alpha was not supposed to be visibly confused about his own interior life. But the thinness of the glass was real. The gathering felt like something he was inside, rather than observing, and the difference was specific and unmistakable, and had not been present in 3 years. He thought about this carefully on the drive home afterward. The estate was quiet when he arrived. Philip had long since turned in, the lights off throughout the building except the study lamp he always left on, a habit Lyra had started because she thought coming home to a dark house was unnecessary when a lamp cost so little to leave burning. He had kept the habit. He sat at his desk for an hour, not reading, just sitting in the way he sometimes sat with things that needed no immediate resolution, but deserved attention. Scout appeared in the drawing, orange and alert and entirely certain of his own significance. The determined eyebrows above the large figure were still determined. He thought about Tuesday. He thought about coffee at a small table by a window on a December morning. He thought about the very specific weight of something that had been closed, beginning, slowly, to open. He went to bed at a reasonable hour, and did not spend a long time awake. Outside the window, the December stars were very clear in the cold air, and the estate's grounds were quiet and frost-white, and somewhere 3 miles away, in a rented cabin at the edge of the conservation district, a woman who had agreed to Tuesday was also probably asleep, or trying to be, with a boy who smelled of the gathering's wood smoke, and a small dog who had come home satisfied. Ethan slept. Marcus found out in the morning, when Ethan came to breakfast looking, as Marcus later described it to Nina, like a man who had remembered something he had forgotten for a long time. He did not say this to Ethan. He said good morning, and passed the coffee, and read his briefing. And when Ethan said, without being asked, that he had invited Elena for coffee on Tuesday, Marcus simply nodded. Good, he said, and meant it as completely as he had ever meant anything. Pine Street coffee was small and warm, and smelled of roasted beans and something baked. It had 6 tables and a window that looked out over the main road through town, where the December morning was doing what December mornings did in the Northern Territory, bright and cold and slightly windswept, with a sky the color of good steel. Elena arrived 2 minutes before 8, which was how she arrived at most things, early enough to settle, late enough to not look anxious. She ordered black coffee at the counter and chose the table by the window, which she preferred because you could see the street, and she had grown up in a house where her father always took the seat that could see the door, and had absorbed the habit without noticing until she was in her 20s. Ethan arrived exactly at 8. He was wearing a dark gray jacket instead of his outdoor coat, and without the fieldwork context he looked slightly different, not less himself, but more so, like a photograph properly in focus. He noticed her immediately, and came directly to the table, and she was aware of the way the 2 women at the counter glanced at him, and then at each other briefly, which she chose not to think about. Good morning, he said. Good morning, she said. I already ordered. I did not know if you wanted me to wait. I would have done the same, he said, and went to the counter. He came back with a large black coffee, and sat across from her, and for a moment, neither of them said anything, not because it was awkward, but because it was actually not awkward, which was perhaps slightly more surprising. How is Noah this morning? He asked. Deeply unhappy that it is a school day, she said. He made his feelings known through a series of pointed sighs that I was meant to take as suffering. I remain unmoved by the sighs. You get them every Tuesday? Only on the Tuesdays, when he has remembered the night before, that the next day is a nursery day, she said. If he forgets, the morning is fine. So the suffering is strategic, Ethan said. Everything about Noah is strategic, she said. He has been strategic since he was about 18 months old. His father was the same way. She said this easily, naturally, the way she had said it the other night at the gathering. She had noticed this shift in herself over the past weeks, the ability to mention Daniel in ordinary conversation, without it becoming an occasion. Daniel once convinced me that a road trip to visit his parents was actually my idea. I did not figure it out until we were already in the car. And was it a good road trip? It was excellent, she said. His mother made the best food I have ever eaten. I was annoyed at the manipulation, and would have happily done it again. Something warmed in Ethan's expression, not a smile exactly, but its antecedent, the expression that precedes a smile in a person who has been careful about smiling for a while. Lyra used to do something similar, he said. He said it without any particular weight, the way she had mentioned Daniel, as though he was testing the ground and found it solid. Not manipulation. She was very direct about what she wanted. But she had a particular way of presenting a plan that made all the alternatives seem obviously inferior. Was she always right? Elena asked. Almost always, he said. I was not graceful about admitting it. Daniel was wrong occasionally, Elena said. When he admitted it immediately and completely. It was infuriating. You cannot stay annoyed at someone who admits they were wrong before you have finished being annoyed. That seems like an effective strategy, Ethan said. It was, she agreed. Noah does the same thing. I see where he gets it. They drank their coffee. The street outside was quiet at this hour. A delivery truck parked up the road, a woman walking a large dog, with the determined stride of someone getting their steps done early. The coffee shop added 2 more customers and a low murmur of background conversation. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Yes, he said, without qualification, which she appreciated. The creek review, she said, on the 9th day. He was quiet for a moment. He had a quality of stillness when he was thinking that was different from the stillness of a person who is not listening. It was engaged and active, as though all of his attention had gathered in one place. The creek review was a real concern, he said. It was, she agreed. But there are several people on your team who could have handled it. You have been to our survey sites twice now since the coat was returned, each time on personal review instead of sending your rangers. He met her eyes directly. Yes, he said. I am not making a complaint, she said. I am asking because I told you I would answer honestly, and I thought the same courtesy went both ways, and I wanted to understand. He set his cup down. You were right that it went both ways, he said. I came because... He stopped, considered, and started again. Since Noah was in the forest, something has been different, he said. I have been trying to decide whether to pay attention to it, or to be sensible about it, and leave it alone. I have not managed to leave it alone. So I am paying attention to it, and the thing that I am paying attention to happens to be in the area of the creek measurements. That is one of the more careful explanations of a thing I have heard, she said. I am a careful person, he said. I know, she said. Are you? He asked. Careful? I used to be less careful, she said. Before Daniel. After. I became very careful for a while, and then I think I became something else. Not less careful, but careful about different things. What things now? She thought about it. Noah's safety, she said. My work. Being honest with people even when it is uncomfortable. Because I spent too much time after Daniel died letting people believe I was fine when I was not, and it wore me out. She looked at the window, and careful about my own heart, she said. Not in a scared way, just aware. It is easy to reach for something warm when you have been cold for a while, and I want to make sure I am reaching for the right thing, and not just the nearest thing. The silence between them had a particular quality. Not the comfortable quiet of people who had known each other long, but the careful quiet of people who were paying close attention. That is fair, Ethan said. Is it the same for you? She asked. Something like that, he said. I have spent 3 years deciding that I was managing well. I have been managing well. And then a child said 7 words to me in a forest, and I could not manage the same things in the same way anymore. 7 words is a lot, apparently, she said. They were the right 7 words, he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and he looked back, and neither of them looked away. I do not know what this is, she said. Whatever this is, I want you to know that I understand that it might not be anything. That two people who have both lost someone can find a certain comfort in the recognition, and that comfort is real, but it is not the same as something that lasts. I have thought about this carefully. So have I, he said. And, she said. And I do not know either, he said. But I would like to find out. Slowly, without pressure, and only if you want to. She looked out the window at the cold December street, and then back at him. I can do slow, she said. He almost smiled. I know how to be patient, he said. I know, she said. Your pack has been telling me this indirectly since the gathering. Your beta's wife told Noah that you were a very steady person. I think she was sending me a message. Nina is subtle, Ethan said. Nina is absolutely not subtle, Elena said. She was extremely warm about it. He did look at her then, briefly, with that almost smile that she was beginning to map the geography of. No, he agreed. She is not subtle, but she is always right. They stayed for another hour. Not because there was more to say. They had said what needed saying, with the unhurried honesty of people who had both learned the cost of saying less. They stayed because the coffee was good and the morning was quiet, and it was pleasant to be in the same room as someone, without performing anything. Elena told him about the Western Territory she had come from, the small house near the river that she had sold and still missed, the way Noah had asked for weeks after the move, whether their old house was lonely. Ethan told her about the first year of his alpha role, when he had been 27, and trying to run a pack while simultaneously being 27, which he said in the dry way of a man who recognized in retrospect that he had been somewhat overconfident. At 10 minutes to 11, Elena's phone reminded her to get Noah. She stood and put on her coat, and he stood, because he had been raised with manners, and also because standing up when someone else does is simply the natural response to the energy change in a room. Tuesday, she said. Tuesday, he said. She paused with her coat half on. I should tell you, she said, that Noah is going to ask me within approximately 4 seconds of getting in the car, whether I saw you today. What will you tell him? Ethan asked. The truth, she said. I am trying to model honest communication. And what is the truth? She finished putting on her coat, and for a moment, she stood in the warm, small coffee shop, with the December street outside, and looked at him, with the clear-eyed expression, that was simply how she faced the world. That I had coffee with someone I think I might like, she said, and that we are going to see. She went out the door, and the bell above it rang once, and the cold street air moved briefly through the warm room. Ethan sat back down and finished his coffee. The woman at the counter, who had been studiously not watching, allowed herself one brief and entirely approving look in his direction. He did not notice. He was looking at the window, at the street, at the December morning, and something about the light through the glass, the way it hit the table, the way the cold made the air outside look sharp and clear and full of possibility, was something he had not noticed in a long time. He left a generous tip and walked back to the estate. Marcus was waiting in the drive, because Marcus was Marcus. Well, he said. Ethan walked past him toward the door. We had coffee, he said. And? Marcus said, falling into step. Tuesday, Ethan said. Marcus stopped walking. Ethan did not stop, but he heard, behind him, the sound of Marcus exhaling slowly. And then, good. Ethan went inside. The house was warm. Philip had the radio on in the kitchen, something quiet and pleasant. The drawing was still on the desk in the study. Ethan sat at his desk and opened his afternoon reports and read them with the full attention they deserved, which was new. Not the deliberate focus of a man imposing discipline on a wandering mind, but the natural attention of someone whose mind had settled somewhere it was prepared to be. He was still being careful. He was still going slowly. He did not know where this went. But Tuesday was now a reliable point on the map, and maps, in his experience, were where reliable things began. He thought about her on the drive back to the estate, not in the circular, unproductive way he had been thinking about things for weeks, turning them over and over without progress, but in the settled, purposeful way of someone who has identified a direction and is now simply moving in it. She had said, I had coffee with someone I think I might like, and that we are going to see. He had been told things before. Good things, kind things, things said by people who meant well. He had learned in 3 years of grief that the things people said were often less reliable than the way they said them. The tone and the expression, and the absence of performance behind the words, these told you more than the words themselves. She had said it quietly, and without looking at him, looking at the street instead, and that was how you knew it was real. When a person cannot quite meet your eyes while saying something true, it is usually because the truth is larger than the occasion, and they are managing it. He drove home and ate the dinner Philip had held for him, and went over the remaining boundary corrections, and was in bed by 10, which was unusual, and which he did not question. In the morning, Marcus arrived at the estate with the Eastern Territory water rights summary and set it on the desk, and then looked at the study with the expression of a man calibrating what to say. "You look rested," he said. "I slept well," Ethan said. "2 nights running," Marcus observed. Ethan looked at him. "I notice things," Marcus said, without apology. "You always have," Ethan said. "It is my job," Marcus said. He sat down across the desk. "Is it Tuesday yet?" he asked. "It was yesterday," Ethan said. "Tuesday was yesterday." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "And?" he said. "And it was good," Ethan said. "She is—" He stopped, because the sentence that wanted to follow was more than he was prepared to say aloud to Marcus, not because he was ashamed of it, but because some things needed time before they could be said without them feeling exposed. "She is very honest," he said finally, "with herself and with me." I did not know how much I had missed that. Marcus accepted this with a small nod that meant many things, and said none of them, which was one of the qualities that made him valuable. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Same time next week," Ethan said. And they went back to the water rights summary, which needed attention, which it got, and the day proceeded in the orderly way that Ethan's days had been proceeding for 3 years, and all the same it was not the same day it would have been. Something had shifted, something real. Not dramatic or sudden, but real, the way good things are real, quietly, without announcement, in the way that a season changes not in a single moment, but in the accumulated weight of many small ones, until one morning you look up and everything is different, and you are glad. Owen noticed too, though he would not have put it in terms of anything as precise as what Marcus noticed. What Owen noticed was that the Alpha had been at the Eastern Boundary Survey twice in 2 weeks, and that both times he had spent time talking to Elena in a manner that, from Owen's professional vantage point on the other side of the creek, looked like the kind of conversation that is not about water measurements. Owen was 23, and had been in 2 serious relationships, and had read enough of the situation to leave them alone, and find additional things to measure on the opposite bank. He was a sensible young man, and Elena appreciated him for it. She told him so the following Thursday, when they were back at the survey site alone. "I appreciate your discretion," she said, without preamble, because she had decided that pretending the 2 conversations had not happened would be more awkward than acknowledging them. Owen looked up from his tablet. "It is none of my business," he said, with the simple directness of someone who has figured out that this is the right answer and sticks to it. "It is not," she agreed. "Thank you." "The creek measurements are genuinely interesting though," he offered. "They are," she said, "genuinely." They went back to the measurements, and the morning was cold and clear, and the creek moved steadily over its stones, and Elena took her readings with the focused care she brought to everything, and thought, in the quiet space that good fieldwork opens in the mind, about honesty and patience, and the specific courage required to choose something again after you have already understood what it costs. She chose it. She had already chosen it, if she was truthful. She had chosen it on the drive home from the medical post after returning the coat, or possibly earlier than that, in the moment when she walked through the door and saw her son wrapped in a stranger's coat eating a biscuit, and the stranger was standing in the doorway with mud on his boots and rain on his jacket, and the particular look of a man who has done the right thing without having made a production of it. You did not choose things like that. They chose you, and then you decided what to do about being chosen. She had decided. She filed her Thursday readings and drove home in the afternoon light, and picked up Noah from the neighbor who watched him on survey days. And Noah said, "Did you see Ethan?" And she said, "Not today." And Noah said, "You should see him more." And she said, "I have a plan." And Noah was satisfied with this, and told her at length about the events of his afternoon, and the day closed around them in the ordinary good way, of days that are headed somewhere. January came with hard frost and short days, and with it came the quiet rhythm that Elena had not expected but should have, because she had been told by everyone who knew Ethan that he was a steady person, and steady people did not rush things, and Tuesday mornings at Pine Street Coffee turned out to be exactly that, steady. They talked for 2 hours every Tuesday morning, sometimes about serious things, their losses, their children, the weight of the years since, and sometimes about entirely ordinary things. The texture of ordinary life that is easy to forget exists when you are in the middle of grief. The kind of conversations that remind you the world is made of small things as well as large ones. She learned that he had strong opinions about coffee temperatures and no strong opinions at all about food, which he ate with the practical efficiency of someone who had stopped noticing it. He learned that she could not listen to music while she worked, that she kept a naturalist's journal she had been filling since she was 12, and that she had once, in the Western Territory, single-handedly relocated a family of beavers who had dammed the wrong creek and refused to accept this. "How do you relocate beavers?" he asked. "Very carefully," she said, "and with a great deal of patience and waterproof clothing." "And they accepted the new location?" "Eventually," she said. "They were stubborn. There was a standoff. I won." He was quiet for a moment. "I believe you," he said. "There were other things too. Things that grew between two people not through any single dramatic event, but through the accumulation of small ones. The way she remembered things he mentioned in passing, and asked about them the following week. The way he was always at the table before her despite living 40 minutes further from town. The way they had both stopped needing to fill every silence, and had started being comfortable inside them instead. Noah, who had been updated on the Tuesday situation, with the full transparency Elena had promised, had opinions. "Why does he not come here?" Noah asked one Sunday afternoon, sitting on the kitchen counter in the way he preferred to observe Elena's cooking. Scout sprawled on the floor below in case anything fell. "He has his own house," Elena said. "We are just friends." Noah thought about this with the long, careful consideration he brought to most things. "Friends come to your house," he said. "My friend Caleb comes to my house." "Caleb is 4 years old," Elena said. "Adults do it differently sometimes." "Why?" "Because adults make things complicated," Elena said, which was the most honest answer available. Noah did not accept this as a final answer, which she had expected, but he let it rest for that day, which she had not entirely expected. She told Ethan about it on Tuesday, and he looked at his coffee cup for a moment, with something in his expression that she had started to recognize as amusement he was containing. "He is not wrong," he said. "He is 4, she said. "He is technically not wrong about a lot of things, but the timing is his." "What would you like?" Ethan asked, and looked at her with the direct, undemanding way he had of asking things. Not pushing, just genuinely wanting to know. "I think," she stopped. She had been thinking about this, honestly and carefully, in the way she tried to think about things that mattered. "I think I would like Noah to know you better," she said, in a normal setting. Not the gathering, not the medical post, just here. Our version of here. She paused. "If you wanted to." "I would like that," he said. "He will ask you about Scout for a very long time," she warned. "I look forward to it," he said. So the following Saturday, Ethan drove to Elena's cabin. It was nothing elaborate. Elena had made soup and bread, which she was actually good at, and there was the ordinary pleasant disorder of a Saturday morning, in a house with a child in it. Noah's drawings were stuck to the refrigerator with mismatched magnets. Scout's toys were spread across the floor in the kitchen in a pattern that suggested recent and enthusiastic play. The kitchen table had a spare seat that Noah had set with deliberate care, including a folded napkin, which Elena had not asked him to do. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway with the particular stillness of someone who is absorbing a room, and Elena watched him absorb it, and saw something in his face that she could not name directly, but that she recognized. The expression of someone who has been in a cold place for a long time and has just walked into warmth. Noah appeared from the hallway, with Scout in a situation that Elena suspected had been under management for some time. "You came," Noah said. "I said I would," Ethan said. "I know," Noah said, with enormous satisfaction, as though Ethan's reliability was something he had backed from the beginning and was now seeing proved. He came forward and took Ethan's hand and led him to the table. in the way he led everyone he had decided to take care of, which was all people in his immediate circle, all the time. "You sit here," he said, indicating the chair with the folded napkin. "That is the guest chair. I folded it specially." "It is very well folded," Ethan said. Noah looked pleased. "I can teach you," he said. "It is not hard." They had soup. The soup was good, a beef and vegetable one that Elena had been making since before Noah was born, and Ethan ate it with the straightforward appreciation of someone who had not been paying close attention to food for years, and was only now noticing that it could be good. Noah described his nursery school with comprehensive detail, including a diplomatic incident involving a paint tray that had not been resolved to his satisfaction. Scout lay under the table on Ethan's feet with the self-possessed confidence of a dog who has assessed the situation and decided where he belongs. After lunch, Noah disappeared to his room and returned with a large cardboard box that turned out to contain an elaborate building set. "Do you want to build?" he asked Ethan. "I do," Ethan said. Elena cleaned up the kitchen and listened, from the sink to Noah directing operations with great precision. Ethan asked reasonable questions and made apparently incorrect decisions about structural support that Noah corrected with patience. At one point she heard Ethan say something very quietly, and then Noah laugh. A real laugh, sudden and bright. The laugh he did when something caught him fully off guard. She stopped moving for a moment. That laugh. She had not heard him laugh like that with anyone outside their small circle of familiar people. It was the laugh he had inherited from Daniel. Sudden, clear, completely unguarded. She went back to the dishes and did not examine how she felt about it, because she had been examining her feelings about things very carefully for weeks, and she was starting to think that there were some feelings that did not improve with examination, and were better simply accepted. Later, with Noah half asleep on the sofa between them, having negotiated a story that had somehow become 2 stories, and then a third, that nobody had agreed to, Elena looked across at Ethan, in the warm afternoon light of the cabin, and he looked back at her, and Noah made a small sound in his sleep, and pressed his face into the sofa cushion, and Scout was on the floor below him like a small guardian. "He is very easy to be around," Ethan said, quietly. "He gets that from his father, too," she said. The words came easily now. She was glad of it. "Did Daniel love the outdoors?" Ethan asked. "He loved being outside," she said. "Fishing, hiking, the water. He would have loved this territory." She smiled, genuinely. "He would have been terrible at the creek measurements, but he would have made it entertaining." "I would have found him useful," Ethan said. "He would have made you laugh," she said. "He was very good at it. Nobody was immune." "Were you?" "Once or twice," she said. "On the days he tried especially hard. He knew when he had lost, and he would try harder." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I am not naturally funny," he said. "I know," she said. "You are naturally something else." He looked at her. "Honest," she said. "You are honest, which is rarer." They sat in the afternoon light, with Noah sleeping between them. And outside the frost was on the windows, and the forest was dark beyond the glass, and none of it pressed down the way it once had. Elena sat in her own house, in her own chair, in the life she had built in this new place, and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not happy exactly, not yet, but in the direction of happy, which was its own kind of good. "I should let you get him to bed," Ethan said. "He will wake up if I move him," she said. "He does this thing where he is asleep but 1% still aware, and if I try to carry him he pops awake and starts asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "Last week he woke up asking whether fish get cold," she said. "The week before that, whether the moon has feelings." "Does it?" Ethan asked. "Probably not," she said. "But I said we did not know for certain, and Noah said that if it did, we should be nice to it just in case." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "He is a very good person," he said. "He is," she said. "He works at it too. He is not naturally patient. He is actually quite impatient. But he has decided to be patient, and so he is. Mostly." She watched her son sleep. "I am very proud of him." The word proud caught in her voice for just a moment, not with sadness, but with the weight of it, the specific weight of pride in a child who has had to grow up alongside difficulty and has chosen to be kind anyway. Ethan heard it. He did not say anything. He simply sat with it, the way he sat with things, fully present, not trying to fix it. This, Elena thought, was not a small thing. The ability to sit with something and not try to make it smaller. She had been surrounded by people who meant well and who, in meaning well, had tried to tidy away her grief, to put it somewhere manageable, to remind her that time healed and life went on, and other cheerful things that were true and utterly unhelpful in the moment. Ethan did not do that. He simply stayed. She understood now why his pack was loyal. It was not only because he was capable and fair and strong. It was because he made people feel that their reality was not something he wanted to adjust. "Same time next Saturday?" she asked. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She nodded. Outside the frost held, and the dark came early, and the forest stood still against the winter sky. Inside the cabin was warm, and Scout breathed steadily on the floor, and Noah slept, and Ethan sat in the ordinary quiet of an afternoon, and Elena looked at all of this and thought, yes, this is the direction of things. And it felt, for the first time in a long time, like a direction she was choosing instead of being carried by. The weeks that followed had a texture that Elena had not expected, but had been, somewhere under everything, hoping for. It was not the texture of romance, in the way that word is usually used, not dramatic, not consuming, not the kind of thing that makes everything else feel less real. It was something quieter and more sustaining, the texture of a life that had been lived in a specific shape for a long time, beginning to find a different shape, and the different shape fitting better than the old one had in the years since the old one had been made impossible. Saturdays became theirs, not officially, nothing was official, but reliably. The cabin, or occasionally the estate when Elena judged that the estate was appropriate for the occasion, which was a judgment she made carefully, and which Ethan respected without comment. Soup, usually. Books for Noah. Fieldwork talk for the adults. Scout under the table on whoever's feet he preferred that day, which changed according to some internal calculus that neither of them questioned. Noah had decided that Saturdays were a fixed feature of the universe, and he planned for them accordingly. He would identify, by Thursday morning, what he wanted to show Ethan, or ask him about, or involve him in. He approached this with the organizational energy he brought to most things, and Elena watched it and felt, every time, the complicated warmth of seeing her son build something new, without letting go of anything old. He still talked about Daniel, he always would. Elena had made sure of it, had told him stories, had kept photographs visible, had answered every question honestly, and at whatever length the question deserved. Noah carried his father in the easy, natural way of a child who has been allowed to keep him, and this was the thing she was most proud of in all the difficult work of the past 3 years. She had not let grief make Daniel into a silence. Ethan understood this. He did not flinch from Daniel's name, or change the subject, or do the careful sidestep that some people did when a dead person was mentioned in the presence of the living relationship that had followed. He asked about Daniel sometimes, genuine questions, the questions of someone who was curious about the person who had shaped the people he cared about. Elena answered them, and the answers were full and real, and nothing about that diminished what was growing between them. She thought about this sometimes, how it was possible to carry 2 loves at once, and have neither be smaller for the other. She had not known it was possible. She had thought, in the months after Daniel died, that loving him was a thing she would do for the rest of her life, in the way you do the one defining thing. Exclusively. In the space that had been made for it. A space that could not be reconfigured for anything else. She had been wrong about that. She was glad to have been wrong. On the last Saturday of January, Noah fell asleep between them in her sitting room, and the fire burned low, and Ethan looked at the sleeping boy, with an expression she had been watching develop across weeks, and which had settled now into something that was simply love, uncomplicated, the way some people are capable of it, without performance or qualification, or the protective distance that love sometimes puts around itself for safety. She thought, he is going to be all right, and then she thought, so am I, and then she thought, for the first time in a long time, so are we. She did not say any of this out loud. Some things do not need to be said immediately. Some things are better held first, carried for a while, confirmed against the weight of ordinary days before they are given to the air. She held it. It held. The snow came in February, and changed the light in all the rooms, and made Noah ungovernable with excitement, and Elena stood at the kitchen window, watching her son attempt to explain to Scout the concept of a snowball, and she felt the quiet, full feeling of a life that had been broken, and had been rebuilt into something that was not what it was before but was, in its own way, good. Not the same good, a different good. Equally real. The call came at 11 on a Thursday night. Elena was still awake because she had been writing field notes at the kitchen table, which was not unusual. She did her best writing late, when Noah was asleep and the cabin was quiet. Scout was on his dog bed in the corner, one ear up, tracking the sounds of the night. Her phone lit up with Marcus's number, which made her set down her pen immediately, because Marcus did not call her in the ordinary course of things. "Is he all right?" she said, before Marcus could speak. A very short silence. "How did you know it was about Ethan?" "It is 11 at night, and you are calling me," she said. "Tell me what happened." "There is a situation on the eastern border," Marcus said. His voice was measured, the voice of a man who had been dealing with crises long enough that he could describe them calmly. A rogue. Someone who has been operating outside pack law in the corridor near the mountains. "We have had 2 injured pack members in the last week. Ethan went to the border with a unit this evening. There was a confrontation." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. "How bad?" "It is contained," Marcus said. "Nobody died. Ethan is. He took a hit. Nothing that will not heal. He is at the medical post at the estate right now." She breathed. "Why are you calling me?" she asked. Another short pause. "He did not ask me to," Marcus said. "He told me not to contact anyone. He specifically listed people not to call. A beat. He did not list you." Elena sat with this for a moment. "He did not list you," Marcus repeated, in the patient way of a man making a point he has decided to make only once. "How long will he be at the medical post?" she asked. "Tonight, at least. Claire wants to watch him until morning." "Thank you," Elena said. She sat at the kitchen table for a minute after she hung up. The field notes were open in front of her. Scout lifted his head and looked at her with amber eyes. She checked Noah, asleep, deep and certain the way he slept when nothing had disturbed his day. She called her neighbor, who was sensible and kind, and had agreed months ago to be emergency backup, and her neighbor answered on the second ring and said, "Come as soon as you like. The spare key is under the mat." Elena drove to the estate at 11:30. The gate guard let her through without hesitation, which told her something about how she was perceived here now, and she parked at the south entrance where she had returned the coat and where, in some ways, the whole shape of this had begun. Claire met her in the hallway of the medical post, with the calm expression of someone who had expected this visit. "He is going to say he is fine," Claire said. "Is he fine?" Elena asked. "He will be," Claire said. "Tonight he is less fine than he wants you to think. Go in." He was sitting up in the medical post bed, which he was clearly finding undignified. He had a bandage on his left arm and a cut above his right eye that had been cleaned and closed. He looked tired in a specific way. Not the exhaustion of injury, but the exhaustion of sustained alertness. The tiredness that comes from keeping everyone else safe for a long time in the dark. He looked up when she came in. Something moved across his face. Surprise first, then something softer and less composed. "Marcus called you," he said. "Marcus called me," she confirmed. She pulled the chair next to the bed and sat down. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," he said. "Claire says you are less fine than you want me to think." He looked at the door. "I am going to have a conversation with Claire." "You can do that in the morning," Elena said. "Right now you are going to sit there and be not fine, and I am going to sit here, and that is what is happening." He looked at her. There was something in his expression that was almost helpless, the expression of a man who has been in charge of everything for so long that the idea of simply being allowed to be not fine in someone else's presence was disorienting. "Elena," he said. "Ethan," she said, and her voice was quiet and steady, and she did not move to comfort him or talk him out of anything. She just sat. He was quiet for a moment, then something released in the set of his shoulders, a very small release, the kind of thing you would miss if you were not paying close attention. "It was a bad evening," he said. "I know," she said. "2 of my people got hurt," he said. "Good people. They are going to be all right. But the moment when I did not yet know that." He stopped. "I do not like that moment." "No," she said. "That is the worst moment." "He was young," Ethan said. "The rogue. 22 maybe. Made bad decisions for a long time, and ran out of options. I do not feel good about how the evening ended." He looked at his hands. I do not always feel good about the things that leadership requires. That is what makes you good at it, she said. He looked at her. The people who feel nothing about the hard parts are the ones who should not be in charge, she said. The fact that it costs you something means you are paying attention to what it costs. He was quiet for a long moment. You do not have to make me feel better about it, he said, but his tone was not sharp. It was almost grateful. I am not trying to make you feel better, she said. I am telling you what I think. You can do with it what you like. He looked at her with the clear, exhausted eyes of someone who has been being strong for too many hours. Why did you come? He asked. She considered the question honestly, the way she tried to consider most things. Because Marcus called and I was awake, she said. And because, she stopped, started again. After Daniel died, people came and went. They brought food and they said things, and they did their best. And then they went home to their lives, which was right, which was what people do. But there were nights, very specific nights, when something had been harder than usual and the house was quiet, when I would have given a lot just to have someone sitting in the room, not saying anything, just there. He was looking at her, and she looked back. You came in the rain, she said. On the 9th day, you drove 40 minutes to look at creek measurements. Those were real measurements, he said. They were real measurements, she agreed. But you also came because you wanted to be near something that felt less cold. He held this without disputing it. So did I, she said simply. They sat in the medical post through the quiet hours of the night. Claire came once to check his arm and brought Elena a cup of tea without being asked, and then left them alone. Outside, the January wind had picked up, and it moved through the territory in long, low sweeps that sounded like the landscape breathing. Elena told him about Daniel's accident. She had not told many people the full version, the mechanics of it, the sequence of events, the particular cruelty of the timing. 2 weeks before Noah's 2nd birthday. She told it plainly, without dressing it up or stripping it down. Ethan listened the way he always listened, with his whole attention, not trying to shape what she was saying into something easier. When she finished, he was quiet for a while. Then he told her about Lyra. Not the summary he had given before, not the careful abbreviated version, but the real one. The phone call, the drive to the hospital, the 45 minutes in a waiting room before they told him, the particular silence of the estate when he came home alone. The way the green walls of the study, that he had painted because she liked green, were unbearable for the first year, and then simply became the walls. She listened. She did not look away. When he stopped, neither of them said anything for a while. I did not know her long enough, he said. People say that time is a measure of love, but I do not think it is actually. I knew everything I needed to know. I just did not have enough of it. No, Elena said. You did not. And that is a real loss, and not a small one, and you do not have to make it smaller. He looked at her. His eyes were tired and honest and fully present, the eyes of a person who has put down something heavy and is standing in the quieter place that follows. I am glad you came, he said. I know, she said. At some point, she could not later say exactly when. She moved her chair closer to the bed, and he did not comment on this, and Scout was not there to rest a chin on anyone's arm, but the absence of Scout was acceptable, because the presence of the other person was enough. She fell asleep in the chair sometime around 3. She woke up at 5, to the early gray light of a January dawn, and the sound of the estate beginning to stir, Philip's early kitchen movements audible through the building, and Ethan, asleep, sitting up in the bed, and she sat for a moment in the gray morning, and looked at him in the way you look at something that has become important, without any single moment of becoming. Claire came in at 5:15. He slept, Elena said quietly. Good, Claire said, with the professional satisfaction of a medic who has achieved her goal. He has not been sleeping. That is the first real sleep I have seen him get in weeks. Elena absorbed this without comment. She left before he woke up. She left a note in the medical post's small supply cupboard, where she had found a pen and a piece of paper, and she wrote, I came, you slept, both good things, see you Tuesday. And then she drove home through the January morning, the roads empty, and the sky lightening above the forest, and picked up Noah from her neighbor, who had let him sleep on the sofa, and drove home, and made breakfast, and told Noah that she had visited a friend who had not been feeling well. Is he better? Noah asked. He will be, she said. Noah nodded, with the satisfaction of someone who considers this a natural result. I will make him a card, he said. What is his favorite color? Elena thought about the dark green walls in the estate study that had been painted for Lyra. Ask him on Saturday, she said. Noah accepted this and ate his toast. Elena sat at her own kitchen table in the morning light and drank her coffee, and felt the particular quiet of a night that has shifted something, the way the air feels different after a storm has passed through, and left the landscape changed, and cleaner, and ready for whatever comes next. She sat at the kitchen table on her own that morning after dropping Noah at school, and she had her second coffee in the quiet way she sometimes had it on school mornings, with no particular rush, and nothing required of the hour except to be in it. The field notes from the previous night were still open on the table. She had not finished them because she had driven to the estate instead. She did not regret the unfinished notes. They could be finished today. She thought about what it was to be someone who stayed. She had been thinking about it for weeks, since the medical post, since the note in the supply cupboard, since the Tuesday mornings and the Saturday visits and the gradually shortening distance between where she was and where she felt most settled. She had been someone who stayed before, with Daniel, in the way of someone who had never questioned it because there was nothing to question. She had simply been where she was supposed to be. After Daniel, staying had become harder. Not in the sense of leaving places. She had not left, not for a long time. And when she finally left, it was because she needed the new start, and knew it. But in the interior sense, she had found it difficult to stay in the present without the present pulling her back toward what the present used to be. She had found it difficult to be in a room without knowing what the room was missing. She was staying now. This morning, this kitchen, this cooling coffee, this life she had built in this territory, from the materials available. She was staying in it fully, without pulling back, without the protective partial absence she had kept between herself and her own life for 2 years. Ethan had done that. She would give him the honest credit, not by arriving and fixing things or by being some particular heroic thing, simply by showing up, repeatedly, in the steady way of someone whose word was the same thing as their action, by sitting in a hospital chair in the small hours without being asked, and leaving a note that said both good things, by asking a precise question at a creek bank and accepting a precise answer, and not requiring it to be more than it was, by being, in all the ways that mattered, exactly what he appeared to be. She finished her coffee and opened her field notes and worked for 3 hours with the clean, focused productivity of someone whose mind was not divided against itself. It was the most she had written in a single sitting in 2 years. Ethan called that evening. She picked up and he said, "You left before I woke up." And she said, "You needed to sleep." And he said, "Thank you." And the word was not a formality. She could hear that it was not a formality, that it carried the specific weight of a man saying a thing that had needed saying, and had found the right moment to say it. She told him that he was welcome, and she meant it, and they talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular and everything in general, the kind of conversation that does not have an agenda and is better for it. She thought afterward about the note she had left. "I came. You slept. Both good things." She had not known if it was too much. She had written it and left it quickly because the hour was early, and the territory was still, and there had been a man asleep in a medical post bed who was less fine than he had wanted to be, and the note had felt right in the moment before she could question it. He had not mentioned the note on the phone. He texted her, after the call ended, 3 words, "Both good things." She looked at her phone for a moment. Then she put it down, and told Noah it was time for his bath, and he argued about it for 3 minutes, and she managed the argument with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had been managing it for 2 years, and the bath happened, and Noah went to bed trailing Scout behind him, and Elena sat in her quiet kitchen, and thought about a man who had been asleep when she left, and had woken to a note, and had texted 3 words back at 10 at night, and thought, yes. This is what steady looks like. This is what she had been waiting to recognize. Sarah had been with the Northern Pack for 19 years. She had come from the Southern Territories at 21, trained under the previous Alpha, and proved herself in the unglamorous way that real competence always proves itself, by doing difficult things well, and consistently, and without requiring anyone to notice. She had risen through the ranks to become second by the time Ethan took leadership, and she had served him with the same undemonstrative dedication she had given everything she had ever committed to. She had also served Lyra. This was not a widely discussed thing, because Sarah did not discuss most things. But Lyra had trusted her specifically and completely, in the way that quick-minded people sometimes trust the ones who are even quicker and quieter. And when Lyra died, Sarah had absorbed the loss with the same stillness she absorbed everything, and had gone on being excellent at her job, and had watched Ethan manage his grief with her own unreadable expression, and had simply stayed. She did not take to most people easily. She had no interest in people who were mostly surface. She had very little patience for anything that was not real. Elena had known none of this when she arrived at the conservation team's clinic station on a Monday in late January to pick up some filed boundary readings and found Sarah waiting at the desk. Sarah was 40, spare and precise in the way of people whose bodies have been kept useful rather than decorative, with dark eyes that registered things quickly and gave nothing back without reason. She was wearing the PAC's patrol jacket, and she had the particular stillness of someone who has decided in advance not to waste a single word. "Elena Voss," she said. Not a question. "Yes," Elena said, and put down her bag and did not look away, because looking away from that kind of directness was always the wrong move. "I am Sarah," she said. "I am the Alpha's second." "I know who you are," Elena said. Sarah looked at her for a moment. "Good," she said. "Then we can skip that part." She nodded toward the 2 chairs by the desk. "Sit down." Elena sat. Sarah sat across from her and set her hands on her knees and looked at Elena with the clear, unsentimental gaze of someone who had decided on an approach and was going to follow it. "I am not here to threaten you," she said. "I did not think you were," Elena said. "Good," Sarah said. "Threats are not useful, and I do not make them." She paused. "I am here because I need to ask you something, and I am going to ask it directly, and I would like a direct answer." "All right," Elena said. "Do you understand what you are asking this man to risk?" Sarah said. Elena was quiet. "Not in the abstract," Sarah said. "Specifically, he is the alpha of this pack. He spent the year after Lyra died in a state that I will describe as functional but diminished, and the 2 years after that building himself back into someone his pack could fully rely on. That was not an easy thing. His people needed him to be whole, and he was not whole, and he did what good leaders do, which is make the gap invisible while they fill it. I watched him do that. I know what it cost." She stopped and let this settle. "He is a better alpha than he was," she continued. "Not because grief taught him things. That is something people say, and it is usually not quite true. But because what he built after it is solid and real and his. He earned it." She looked at Elena directly. "And now something is different. He is less careful about his own safety, which Claire has noticed. He is more present, which Marcus has noticed. He put a drawing on his desk. He drives to the eastern boundary personally." She paused. "You have done that." "I have not done anything intentionally," Elena said. "I know," Sarah said. "That makes it real. Performances do not change a person from the inside out. What I am asking is whether you know what you are walking into. Whether you understand that if this fails, if you decide at some point that you are not ready, or that it is not right, or simply that you cannot do this, you are not only ending something between 2 adults. You are doing it to someone who has already survived one ending, and I am not certain he could easily survive another." The clinic was quiet. Outside, the January light was flat and cold. Elena sat with this for a long moment. She did not rush her answer. She had learned that the instinct to reassure someone quickly was often about making yourself comfortable rather than being honest. "I know," she said. "I think about it." "What do you think about it?" "I think that I am not the only one at risk," Elena said. "I have a son who has decided he loves this man. I have my own history. I am not walking into this lightly, or without understanding the weight of it." She met Sarah's eyes. "I am also not walking into it because I am lonely, or because he is available, or because it is convenient. I am walking into it because he is the most honest person I have met in years, and because when I am around him, I feel like my own life has more oxygen in it, and because my son, who is a better judge of people than most adults I know, has already decided." Sarah looked at her. "I am terrified," Elena said. "I want you to know that. I am not coming into this with confidence. I am coming into it with honesty, and I am hoping that is enough, and I know it might not be, and I know that does not protect either of us." The silence stretched. "Lyra was afraid too," Sarah said. Her voice had changed. Not softer, but more private. She did not show it easily, but she told me once, early on, that she was afraid of what it meant to be the person an alpha depended on. She said she hoped she was enough for what it would require. Was she? Elena asked. Yes, Sarah said. Every day she was. She was quiet for a moment. She would have wanted him to have this, she said. She would have been furious with him for grieving as long as he has, and then she would have helped him through it herself, which was her way. Elena did not say anything. She understood that love does not run out, Sarah said. That choosing it again is not a betrayal of what came before. She was very clear-eyed about the things that matter and the things that do not. She stood up. The directness was still there, but the angle of it had shifted. I am not giving you my blessing, she said. I am not in a position to give that, and it is not mine to give. I am simply checking. I understand, Elena said. He does not know I am here, Sarah said. I assumed that, Elena said. If he finds out, I will say it was a routine introduction, Sarah said. Which it was, partly. Of course, Elena said. Sarah moved toward the door, and then paused with her hand on the frame, and looked back. The morning light from the window fell across her in a way that showed the years of her, the ones that had made her useful and precise and unsentimental, and also, in ways she would never volunteer, devoted. Be straight with him, she said. That is all. If you feel something, say it. If you are afraid, say it. If you decide it is not right, say it. Do not let it become something he has to figure out himself in the dark. She paused. He has spent too much time figuring things out himself in the dark. I know, Elena said. Sarah nodded once and left. Elena sat in the clinic for a few minutes after she was gone. She was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the particular physical response to something that has been said so directly and so truly that the body registers it before the mind has finished processing. She thought about Lyra. She had not thought much about Lyra as a person, a real one. She had thought about her as a presence in Ethan's history, as someone he had loved and lost, but not as someone specific, particular, alive. She thought about her now. A woman who had loved clearly and without fear, who had been honest and quick-minded and present, who had looked at a grieving man and helped him back toward himself, and who had, this was the part that stayed with Elena, wanted more for him than his grief, even from wherever people go when they leave. She picked up her bag and her boundary readings and walked out into the January morning. She called Ethan on the way to her truck. He answered on the second ring. Elena, are you free this evening? She asked. A brief pause. Yes. Noah goes to bed at 7:30, she said. Come at 8. I want to talk to you. Another pause. This one had a different quality. The quality of a person taking a careful breath. All right, he said. It is not bad, she said, because she could hear what was underneath his stillness. It is not a conversation where you need to brace yourself. I want to say something to you that I do not want to wait until Tuesday to say. I will be there at 8, he said. She hung up and stood beside her truck in the cold parking area and looked at the January sky, white and wide and very quiet, and thought, all right, this is where we are now, let us be honest about it. She had told Sarah the truth. She was terrified. She had history that sat heavy in her chest when she let it, and she had a son whose heart was wide open to this man, and she had her own heart, which had been handled very carefully for 2 years, and which was starting to make itself heard in ways she could not continue to manage by simply staying busy. But Sarah had also been right about something she had not said directly, that fear and honesty could coexist, and that the only dangerous version was fear without honesty, the version where you keep the important things quiet until they become too large to manage quietly. Elena was done keeping important things quiet. She drove home and made dinner, and put Noah to bed at 7:30, which involved 2 books and a philosophical discussion about whether Scout should sleep inside the bed or outside the bed, which was resolved in Scout's favor, because Scout had already gotten in and seemed comfortable. At 8 o'clock exactly, she heard the truck on the drive. She opened the door before he knocked, because she was done with unnecessary formalities, and he stood on the step in his jacket, with the cold night behind him, and looked at her with the steady, open expression of a person who has come ready to listen. Come in, she said. He came in. She made tea. They sat at the kitchen table. I talked to someone today, she said. About you. About this. About what we are doing. She paused. I am not going to tell you who, but I want to tell you what came out of it. He waited. I am not afraid of feeling something for you, she said. I want to be clear about that. I have been careful, and I think the care has been right, but I do not want the care to become a reason to not say what is actually true. She looked at her cup. What is actually true is that the way I feel when I am with you is different from the way I feel most of the rest of the time. It is not dramatic, it is just easier. The way breathing in a good room is easier than breathing in a bad one. He was looking at her with complete attention. I am not making you any promises, she said. I am not ready for large promises, and I think you understand that. But I want to be honest, that this is real. What I feel, whatever it is becoming, it is real, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I feel it too. I know you do, she said. I wanted you to know that I know. The tea cooled between them. Scout came into the kitchen, looked at Ethan, and walked over, and sat on his foot in the way that was simply, by now, Scout's standard greeting. He likes you, Elena said. So you have said, Ethan said. Noah said it first, she pointed out. Noah is a reliable source, he said. They sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house, with the tea cooling, and Scout on Ethan's foot, and the winter dark outside, and nothing was solved, or decided, or concluded. But something had been said that needed saying, and the room was warmer for it, and when he left at 10, and she stood at the door and watched his truck lights move down the road through the trees, she felt the absence differently than she would have felt it a month ago. Not like loss, like someone who has stepped out for a moment and will be back. The conversation at the kitchen table that night opened something that the previous weeks had been building toward without arriving at. Not in the sense of a conclusion. In the sense of a foundation, something solid confirmed, something true named in the air between them, so that it existed now in the shared space, rather than only in the interior space of each of them. They had both been carrying it. She had known this, and she had thought he had known it too, and the kitchen table on a January evening had confirmed it, and the confirmation was not dramatic, but it was real, in the particular way that only true things are real, with a weight that drama does not have. Ethan stayed until 10. He drove away, and the truck lights moved through the trees at the edge of the drive, and Elena stood at the door, watching them, until they were gone, and then she went inside, and did the small ordinary things of a house at the end of a day, locked the door, checked on Noah, gave Scout his last small biscuit, turned off the kitchen light. She sat for a few minutes in the dark sitting room before going to bed. She was not sad. She had sat in dark rooms while sad before, and she recognized the difference. This was not that. This was the quiet that follows something large. The specific stillness of a person who has said a true thing, and is now living in the space after it, before the space fills with whatever comes next. Whatever came next, she thought, would be good. She went to bed and slept soundly, without the fragmented half-sleep that had been her default for most of 2 years. She woke early because she always woke early, and the February morning was gray and cold at the window, and Noah was still asleep, and Scout was at the foot of the bed breathing steadily. She thought, I am not afraid. She stayed with this. It was true. The fear she had named to Sarah and to Ethan and to herself, in her own careful interior accounting, it was still there in some form. Because she was not reckless, and she was not without memory. But it was not the dominant thing. The dominant thing was the other thing, the one she had named in the kitchen, something real, something she wanted. She got up, made coffee, opened the field notes. She worked until Noah woke and came looking for her, and the day began with the comfortable ordinary motion of a day in a life that was genuinely hers, in a territory she had chosen, toward a future she was choosing. One Tuesday and one Saturday at a time. February brought snow. It came in the night, real snow, the kind that rewrites the landscape, and Noah woke at 6 in the morning with the particular high-pitched energy of a child discovering winter for the first time, in a place where it means something. He stood at the window in his pajamas with Scout beside him, and both of them pressed their noses to the glass, and Elena came into the kitchen to find them like that, and she stood in the doorway for a moment, before either of them noticed her. And she thought, this This is what I have built. And it was good. She made porridge and let Noah eat it in front of the window, which was not the rule, but today was clearly a window-watching morning, and some rules bend for snow. Scout paced excitedly near the back door, making his views on the situation very clear. Noah was in full snow clothes and out the door by 8, dragging Scout on his small red lead. Elena stood on the porch with her coffee and watched them investigate the driveway and decided that this was the kind of morning that did not require productivity. She had 2 field reports due by Friday. They would get done on Thursday. Her phone rang. It was Ethan's number. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." His voice had a quality she had learned to read, the quality of someone who was in the middle of thinking something through. "Do you have plans today?" "Noah is currently conducting a scientific survey of the snow," she said. "Is the survey going well?" Scout ate some. Noah took notes. She watched her son crouch near the fence, very serious, examining something in the snowbank. "What is on your mind?" "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "I have been trying to decide how to ask it, and I have not found a way I am satisfied with, so I am going to ask it directly, and accept that it will not be particularly smooth." She smiled, though he could not see it. "All right." "Marcus keeps telling me that there is no good time for the important things," he said, "and I keep telling him that patience is a virtue, and he keeps telling me that patience and avoidance are different things, and I think Marcus is right, which I am going to tell him exactly once, and then never again." "That seems fair," she said. "I would like you and Noah to come to the estate today," he said. "For the day, not for a reason, just, I would like you to be here, in the house, with me." A pause. "I have been thinking about what it would feel like to have you here, not for a visit, but simply because you came, and I have decided that I would like to find out." She was quiet for a moment. Snow fell past the porch in light, steady flakes. "What time?" she said. "Whenever Noah has finished his survey," he said. She smiled. "Noon," she said. "We will come at noon." They arrived at 12:15, because Noah required a second coat layer, and Scout required a judgment call about whether the car ride warranted his collar with the small bell, which he did not enjoy, but which Elena considered non-negotiable in busy environments. The estate was quiet in the snow, the paths cleared, the stone of the building darker at the base where the wet had climbed, the bare oak in the courtyard holding a line of white along each branch. Ethan met them at the front door, and this was different from the south entrance and the medical post in the clinic, the front door of the house, which was an act of something. Noah said, "It is very big," in a tone of extreme satisfaction, because Noah liked things that matched their reputation. "It is," Ethan agreed. "Can I see all of it?" Noah asked. "You can see most of it," Ethan said. Noah's face made clear that most of it was acceptable as a start. Philip was in the kitchen, and he had clearly been forewarned, because there was hot chocolate already made, and a plate of something that smelled like ginger and butter and intent. Philip greeted Noah with the seriousness of a man who has given the situation his professional attention and has produced the appropriate response. "You made biscuits," Noah said, looking at the plate. "I did," Philip said. "Are they the ginger ones?" Noah asked, because Noah had strong opinions about ginger. "They are," Philip said. Noah looked at Elena for permission, and she nodded, and he took one with both hands and ate it with the focused respect of someone who has recognized quality. "It is very good," he told Philip. Philip looked, for a moment, exactly like a person who had been given the review that mattered. "Thank you," he said. Ethan showed Noah the study, and the long sitting room, and the room that had been a library before it became a room where old equipment was stored, and which still had the good shelves, and Noah had opinions about all of them. He asked about the drawing on the desk in the study, the orange crayon drawing, which was still there, and when Ethan said he had kept it there because he liked it, Noah stood very straight with pride, and did not say anything, which was unusual for Noah, and which meant the thing was too important for words. Elena walked beside Ethan, while Noah led the way through rooms, Scout investigating each threshold before crossing it, and she thought about the house as Ethan must know it, not as a large building, but as a specific silence, the kind that collects in corners and high ceilings when a place has been very full and then is not. It was not that silent now. They had lunch in the kitchen because the kitchen was warmer, and because Philip had made soup again, and Ethan had learned, in the weeks of Saturday visits, that soup was a reliable common ground. Noah ate with enthusiasm and described to Philip, who was a very good listener, the current status of various nursery school situations that required resolution. Ethan ate and looked at his kitchen, with an expression Elena noticed and did not comment on. After lunch the snow came harder, and they ended up in the long sitting room near the fireplace. A real fire, which Noah had opinions about, and which Ethan built with the efficient care of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Scout fell asleep immediately on the hearthrug, in the way of dogs who recognize a good situation. Noah built an elaborate structure from a set of wooden blocks that lived in a cabinet and which appeared to have been there for a long time and were of excellent quality, not the kind of thing bought recently in anticipation. Elena looked at the blocks. "My grandfather's," Ethan said, from the armchair beside her, his voice low so as not to break Noah's concentration. She looked at him. "He kept them here," he said, "for grandchildren who were not yet born. He died before." He stopped. "Lyra used to say he was waiting," he said, "that he was optimistic. She had a particular talent for finding the best version of things." Elena reached across the small space between their chairs and put her hand on his arm for a moment, not holding it, just there. He looked at her hand and then at her face, and something in his expression was entirely, briefly unguarded. "Thank you for bringing them here today," he said. "Thank you for asking us," she said. Noah looked up from his blocks. "What are you talking about?" he asked, with the direct efficiency of a child who dislikes being outside a conversation. "We were saying that we are glad you are here," Elena said. Noah considered this. "I am glad to be here too," he said, with the comfortable dignity of someone accepting their due. "Can we come again?" "Yes," Ethan said. Noah looked satisfied and returned to his blocks. Elena looked at the fire. The snow was heavy now, coming down steadily beyond the windows, and the sitting room was warm, and the dog was asleep, and the blocks clicked quietly as Noah worked. Ethan was in his chair with his coffee, and he was not performing at ease. He was simply easy, in the rare way of a person who has stopped working to be elsewhere. "Ethan," she said. He looked at her. She had thought about how to say this. She had been thinking about it since the night at the kitchen table, since the things she had said and the things he had said, since the border incident and the medical post and the long hours before dawn. "I do not want to keep going slowly," she said. He was still. "I know that was what we agreed," she said, "and I think the slowness was right. For a while. I needed to know what this was before I let it become anything. I needed to know that I was choosing something, and not just falling toward it." She looked at the fire. "I know what it is now." "What is it?" he asked. His voice was quiet. "Something real," she said. "Something I want." She met his eyes. "I am not ready for large declarations. I am probably not going to make any for some time, because I am someone who needs to mean them before I say them. But I am ready to stop treating this like something we are not sure about yet." He was looking at her with his whole face open, in the way it almost never was. Not guarded, not measured, not filtered through the authority he wore as a default. "I have not been sure about many things in the last 3 years," he said. "I have been sure about this." She nodded once. Outside, the snow fell in long, steady curtains past the sitting room windows. Inside, the fire was good, and Scout was asleep, and Noah was building something he had not named yet, but which appeared to have architectural ambitions. Nothing dramatic happened. No declarations were made in the large sense. What happened was smaller and realer than that. Ethan moved his chair slightly closer to hers, and she did not move away, and they sat near the fire with their coffee, and watched Noah build his structure. And when Noah eventually tired of the blocks, and came and climbed into the space between them on the long sofa, with the easy confidence of a child who knows he belongs there, neither of them told him the sofa was not the right place. He fell asleep between them at 4 in the afternoon, in the snow-muffled quiet of the estate, with one hand on Scout, and one hand on the arm of the sofa. Elena looked at him sleeping, the familiar face of her son, the child who had wandered into a November forest, and changed the direction of things. She looked at Ethan, who was looking at Noah, with an expression she recognized, because she had seen it in her own mirror. The specific softness of a person looking at something they had not thought they would have again. "He is going to be heartbroken if this ever stops," she said quietly. "It is not going to stop," Ethan said. She looked at him. "I am serious," he said. "I am not saying it to reassure you. I am saying it because I know myself well enough to know that I do not do things part way. If I am in, I am in. And I am in. She held this. She checked it against what she knew of him, the steadiness, the honesty, the way he did what he said, and found it true. So am I, she said. The fire burned. The snow came down. Noah slept between them, and Scout breathed, and the house that had been so full of silence held, for the evening, the comfortable weight of people who have decided they are in the right place. Marcus sent a message at 5:30, asking if he should have Philip hold dinner for more people. Ethan showed Elena the message. She looked at it, and then at him. "Tell him yes," she said. Ethan typed, "Yes, 3 more." Scout was not likely to eat Philip's cooking, but Ethan included him in the count anyway, and when Marcus read the message, he put his phone in his pocket and went to tell Philip, and Philip, without any visible change of expression, simply made more soup. Which was, all things considered, the right response. After dinner that evening, which Philip had expanded with the quiet efficiency that was simply how he operated, Marcus and Nina took the children outside to see the stars. It was a clear February night, cold and brilliant, and Noah went with them wrapped in a blanket and carrying Scout, who had the skeptical expression of a dog being carried when he was perfectly capable of walking, but who tolerated it because Noah was Noah. Ethan and Elena stood in the kitchen while Philip disappeared to his own quarters, and the house was quiet around them, in the way it was quiet when it was full of people who had gone temporarily elsewhere. "He loves it here," Elena said. She meant Noah. She meant also something larger than Noah. "I know," Ethan said. She looked at the kitchen, at the space on the counter where she had put her coffee cup, at the chair that had become Noah's chair, at the small cluster of his drawings stuck to the side of the refrigerator by Philip, who had not asked permission but had done it, and about whom Elena had very warm feelings because of it. "I have been thinking," she said. He waited. "About the cabin lease," she said. "It ends in April." She looked at him. "I have been thinking about what April looks like." He was very still. "I am not asking you to say anything about it right now," she said. "I am not making a request. I am simply telling you that I have been thinking about it, and that when I think about it, the thing I think is that I do not particularly want to find another cabin." He was quiet for a long moment. "I do not want you to find another cabin either," he said. She looked at him. "I want you here," he said. "I have wanted you here for longer than is probably reasonable, given the timeline. But I did not want to rush it, or push it, or make it something you did, because the situation required it, rather than because you chose it." "I am choosing it," she said. "I know," he said. "That is why I am saying it." They stood in the kitchen, and the February night was outside the windows, and the stars were very clear over the estate's grounds, where Marcus was showing Noah constellations, in the way Marcus showed everything, thoroughly, with context, with the patient interest of someone who believed that all knowledge was worth having. "April," Ethan said. "April," she said. And that was how it was decided, quietly, in a kitchen, by 2 people who had both learned that the important things did not require ceremony to be real. They required only honesty, and the will to stay, and the kind of patience that is not the same as waiting, but is the same as choosing, every day, to remain. Noah came back inside an hour later, with frozen fingers, and a comprehensive report on the winter sky, which he delivered to both of them, standing by the fireplace, still in his coat, Scout under one arm, his cheeks red and his eyes bright. "Marcus says the stars have names," he said. "All of them. People made up the names a long time ago." "They did," Ethan said. "That is a lot of names to remember," Noah said. "People had a lot of time," Elena said. Noah considered this. "We should name one," he said. "Our own. We can pick one, and it can be ours, and when we see it, we will know." Elena looked at Ethan over Noah's head. "All right," Ethan said. "Which one?" Noah turned to the window and pointed at the sky with great authority, indicating a star that was, by Elena's rough estimate, almost certainly not a single star, but possibly several. "That one," he said. "The bright one." "It is very bright," Ethan said seriously. "We will call it Scout," Noah said, which settled the matter entirely. Scout, from under Noah's arm, appeared deeply satisfied by this. "A year is a long time, and it is no time at all." Elena knew this the way you know things that are only learned by living them, not as an idea but as a fact that lives in the body, in the specific awareness of how a year can feel like 10 years, and also like a single long day, depending on what fills it, and what it costs, and what it gives back. She was standing at the kitchen window of the estate on a November morning, watching the garden. The garden was what it was in November: bare branches, dark soil, the small stone marker near the oak tree in the corner. She had been told about the marker before she ever set foot in this house, told about it carefully, and with kindness, by Ethan, who did not believe in things being discovered by accident when they could be known in advance. She had stood beside it on a September morning, Ethan beside her, and she had looked at Lyra's name in the stone and felt something she had not expected, not the awkwardness or displacement she had feared, but something more like respect, recognition, the acknowledgement of a life that had been real and mattered and was owed its proper place. Noah had asked about the marker directly, because Noah asked about everything directly, and Ethan had told him the truth in the simple, complete way he told Noah the truth about all things. Noah had listened carefully and then said, "She sounds nice," and then, "Can we plant flowers by it in the spring?" And Ethan had said yes, and in March, they had planted a row of small white flowers that Elena did not know the name of, but that Ethan said Lyra had liked, and Noah had taken the planting very seriously and watered them every day for 2 weeks, until Elena gently explained that the rain was handling it. The garden still had those flowers, dried and small at the base of the stone now that November had stripped everything back. Elena heard footsteps on the stairs, the uneven rhythm of a small child descending stairs too large for him, holding the rail the way she had taught him, one step at a time. She turned from the window, as Noah came into the kitchen in his socks, and the blue pajamas he had mostly outgrown and should have replaced 2 months ago, but which he refused to let go of. Scout followed him, tail already moving. "Good morning," Elena said. "Is Ethan up?" Noah asked, with the directness of a child whose priorities are always visible. "He is in the study," Elena said. "He has calls this morning." Noah made a face that expressed his diplomatic opinion of calls. "Breakfast," Elena said. Noah climbed onto his chair at the kitchen table. His chair, the one that had been his from the day he had declared it, with the absolute authority of a 5-year-old who had decided this was how things were. The estate had held this without argument. In fact, the estate had absorbed Noah's presence in the way that good homes absorb children, by making room, and then making it feel like the room had always been there, waiting. It had been 6 months since they moved in. Elena had not planned it to happen so quickly. She had imagined a longer timeline, more gradual, more cautious. But the cabin lease had ended in April, and when it ended, the alternative of finding another place had felt, to both of them, like a conversation they no longer needed to have. Ethan had not made it a large event. He had simply asked her, over Tuesday morning coffee, whether she wanted to bring her things over. She had said yes. And they had. Philip had made space in the kitchen, with the efficiency of someone who had been hoping for this outcome for some time, and had prepared for it quietly. Sarah had arrived on the first Saturday, with a moving crate, and no explanation, helped carry boxes for 3 hours, eaten dinner, and left. Marcus and Nina had come with their kids, and the kids and Noah had conducted a thorough tour of the estate grounds that resulted in muddy boots all around and nobody minding. It was not perfect. Nothing was perfect. Elena and Ethan had differences. She was sharp in the mornings and he needed his first hour in quiet. She was comfortable with noise and disorder in ways that took him time to adjust to. There were conversations that were hard to have, about the logistics of 2 people who had both built lives independently, trying to make those lives into one shared life. There were evenings when the size and silence of the estate pressed in, and evenings when Noah's energy was more than any one person should manage alone, and evenings when Elena missed the Western Territory, and the river, and the small house she had sold, and the life that had existed in it. But there were other evenings too. She was thinking about one of those evenings when she heard his footsteps in the hall, the even, unhurried ones she could identify now from the sound alone, and Ethan came into the kitchen, in a jacket that suggested the calls were done, or taking a break, and he said good morning to Noah, who said good morning back, with the comfortable informality of someone who does not stand on ceremony with the people they belong to. And then Ethan came to the window, and stood beside Elena, and looked out at the garden. She did not move over. He stood close enough that their shoulders were touching, lightly, the way you stand next to someone when you are not conscious of it, because the proximity is simply right. The white flowers held late this year, he said. They did, she said, past the first frost. He was quiet for a moment. Lyra would have said they were being stubborn, he said. Good for them, Elena said. He looked at her sideways. There was warmth in it, the specific warmth of a man who has learned to hold two loves at once without either diminishing the other, which was one of the things she had not known was possible until she watched him do it. Noah wants to show you something, Ethan said. He told me last night. He has been holding it for the right moment. Elena looked at her son, who was consuming toast with great focus. Noah, she said. Noah looked up. Ethan says you have something to show me. Noah put down his toast with the energy of someone whose moment has arrived. He slid off his chair and went to the small backpack he kept by the kitchen door, his school bag, which came home every day full of the accumulated production of a 5-year-old who took his creative output seriously. He rummaged in it with great purpose and produced a folded piece of paper. He brought it to Elena and unfolded it with ceremony. It was a drawing, large format, done in the careful mixed media style he had been developing since he discovered that crayon and marker could coexist on the same page, a discovery he considered one of the major artistic breakthroughs of his career. It showed 4 figures. Elena recognized them by relative size and detail, herself, small and dark-haired, with what appeared to be field equipment. Ethan, very large with the determined eyebrows from the first drawing, carried over and refined. Noah himself, slightly smaller than the others, but standing with notable presence and confidence. And Scout, rendered in the same exuberant orange-red, sitting at the front with his chin up, and his tail implied, rather than drawn, in the way of an artist who has made a compositional decision. They were all holding hands, Noah and Ethan and Elena, connected. Scout was not holding hands because Scout did not have hands, but he was included in the formation, in the way of someone who anchors a group rather than standing at its edge. Above them, Noah had written something in the large, careful letters of a child who is still learning, but is taking it seriously. It said, "My family." Elena stared at the drawing. She had not cried in front of Noah in nearly 2 years. She had maintained this with care, and with the occasional enormous effort, because her rule was her rule, and she meant it. She came very close to breaking it now. She pressed her lips together and breathed once, carefully, through her nose, and then she looked at Noah. "Can I keep this?" she asked. Her voice was completely steady, which was a significant personal achievement. "I made it for you," Noah said, with magnificent patience. "That means it is yours." "It is the best drawing I have ever seen," Elena said, and she meant it entirely. Noah looked pleased, but not surprised, in the way of someone who has done his best work and knows it. She looked up at Ethan. He was looking at the drawing over her shoulder, and his expression was the one she had first seen in the medical post, that specific openness that lived in him under everything else, the version of his face that was not managed. He looked at the drawing, and at Noah, and then at her, and his eyes held something that did not need words, and that she held back without words. "Come on then," Noah said to Scout, and the two of them went back to the table to finish breakfast, with the easy confidence of a boy who has delivered his work and can now get on with the day. Later, much later, after calls and school and field work in the afternoon, Noah found Ethan in the study. Ethan was reading. The autumn light came through the window at the low angle it always came at this time of year, catching the dust in the room and the grain of the old desk and the small frame drawing on the shelf that was, by now, in excellent company. Elena had added her things to the room gradually and naturally, a stack of naturalists' journals, a glass jar of feathers that Noah had collected from the grounds and catalogued with assistance, a photograph of the western river she had grown up beside. The room was not the same room it had been. It was better. Noah appeared in the doorway and came across the room in his socks and climbed into the armchair across from Ethan with the comfortable freedom of someone who has understood, for some time, that this space is his to move through. He was quiet for a moment. Ethan put down his book. Noah looked at him with the thinking face, the evaluating face, the one that preceded important statements. Then he climbed out of his chair, crossed the room, and climbed onto the armchair's arm, and pressed himself against Ethan's side, the way he sometimes did, without preamble or explanation, simply because he wanted to. Ethan put his arm around him. Noah pressed his face against Ethan's shoulder, and then he lifted it slightly, and he made a small sound that was not quite a word. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "You still smell the same," Noah said. His voice was very small and completely certain. Ethan was still. "Like the forest," Noah said, "and the fire. You always smell the same." He settled more firmly against Ethan's side. "Mommy says that people who smell the same all the time are steady people. She says steady people are the best kind." Ethan did not say anything for a moment. Noah, who had delivered this information and apparently considered it complete, tucked his chin down and went quiet, with the comfortable ease of a child who has said what he came to say and has no further requirements. "She is right," Ethan said. "I know," Noah said. "She is usually right." He was quiet again. "Are you going to marry her?" he asked, in the tone of someone raising a practical matter they have been meaning to get to. Ethan was quiet. Outside the study window, the garden was still. The oak stood bare. The white flowers were small and dry at the base of the stone. "I would like to," he said. "Good," Noah said. "I think she wants you to. She does this thing where she looks at her hand sometimes, like she is thinking about it." Ethan looked at the top of Noah's head. "You are very observant," he said. "I know," Noah said. "Scout is too. He told me first." The fire in the study was warm. The afternoon was fading into early dusk, in the particular way of November afternoons, when the dark comes with quiet speed, and the lights inside become significant. Elena was somewhere in the house. He could hear her, distantly, the sound of her moving in the way he had learned to locate the way you learn the sounds of a house, not consciously but through the accumulated knowledge of being present in it. He thought about a forest in the rain, a small boy under a fallen pine, with a rust-colored puppy pressed to his chest. 7 words that had struck something in him like a bell being struck, not gently, not by accident, but by the full, deliberate weight of a mallet, the sound ringing through the silence of 3 years and continuing to ring. He thought about creek measurements and dry-cleaned coats and Tuesday mornings at a small coffee shop and a note left in a supply cupboard that said, "I came, you slept, both good things." He thought about the drawing on his desk that had started it, the one still on the shelf, faded slightly now, the orange of Scout's body a little less vivid, the determined eyebrows still entirely determined. He thought about how he had put it on the desk and then not been able to explain why, and how Marcus had not said anything about this and also had said everything about it, and how both things were correct, and that was the particular nature of being known by someone for 30 years. He looked at the boy against his side, asleep now, the way Noah fell asleep, completely, instantly, deeply, the way children sleep when they feel safe enough not to monitor their own safety. He thought, this is what it is to be chosen. Not once, but continuously, day by day, by small people who have no strategic reason to choose you, and who choose you anyway, because something in them recognizes something in you, and decides, yes, that one, we will keep that one. He did not deserve it. He was not sure anyone deserved it, that it was the kind of thing that arrived not because it was earned, but because it was real, and real things do not submit to the deserving logic, they simply are. The fire burned. The dusk came. Elena appeared in the study doorway, took in the scene, Ethan in the armchair, Noah asleep against his side, Scout on the floor below, and leaned against the doorframe with a softness in her face that she did not always allow herself, but had been allowing more, lately, in these rooms. "He fell asleep on you again," she said. "He does that," Ethan said. "He only does it with people he trusts completely," she said. Ethan looked at Noah's sleeping face, the face that was Daniel's face in certain expressions, and Elena's face in others, and entirely Noah's face in all of them, the specific irreplaceable face of a specific irreplaceable person. "I know," he said. Elena came into the room and sat on the arm of his chair on the other side, not because there was no other place to sit, but because the other places were not here, and here was where things were. She looked at her hand. She was not aware she was doing it. He noticed. He said nothing, but he thought, soon. When it is right, when the words are the right words and the moment is the kind of moment that belongs to the thing, soon. Outside, the November dark settled over the Northern Territory, and the estate was warm and lit, and the garden was still, and the oak held its bare branches against the sky, and near its base, the small white flowers were dry and pale and there, holding on past the first frost, the way stubborn things do, the way the best things always do.